Hey, what's up? It's Cute What If. This side. Today we will be seeing, what if Mineta time travels? Now before we move ahead with the fic, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. For future what ifs like this. Mineta Minoru was a great many things, but a delusional person was not one of them. He was pretty sure that whatever this was not an illusion. It was too real to be anything but. He knew what led him here, but had he known that Aries' power could go that far, had they known, then they could have maybe mended things so that the world would not be in such a mess. It was too late to dwell on that, because now, he was alone in the past and he had to change things. His responsibility as a hero, as the 7th commander. Had he known in the past that he would become a respected person and would have bragged, but now, he just didn't feel like he deserved. They now understood why most leaders did not like their position. Mineta looked at the mirror and sighed. He didn't remember being so short. He grew up to be quite tall, not that tall, mind you. 6 feet tall, or maybe a little more, but yeah, standing next to giants and muscular heroes like Midoriya or Kirishima made him seem like a pretty normal person, though definitely not short. He grimaced, sensing the headache coming. Who could have thought that he out of everyone would travel back in time? It was more a burden for someone like the symbol of hope that has been Midoriya, not the shadow that Mineta was. As he was thinking, laid in bed, snorted at his own reaction upon his little time travel, let's keep calling it that, as for now hours ago. Mineta breathed heavily and snaped his eyes open. CK, what the heck happened? He looked down to find himself on a freaking real bed. He widened his eyes and panicked, so much that he fell loudly on the floor. His battle instinct kicked in immediately. He stood up in a defensive position and narrowed his eyes, steadying his breath. Carefully, he looked around him. The room, the smell, the bed were all too familiar. An illusion quirk. But how? And why this room? The last thing he remembered was, Eri, calm down. Sit. Control yourself, Eri. No, FCK, it couldn't be what he was thinking, right? Nafseeking way. It had to be an illusion. It had to. He quickly made his way toward where he remembered the mirror being. A sharp gasp left his lips. A short kid. A very short kid was what he was seeing. No way in hell was this real. He stared a few seconds, and then rapidly took one of his heads and shaped it as a sharp knife. A very realistic illusion. Eri must have hidden a second quirk, right? That's probably it. He had to get out of this. The people still needed him. There was still a war that needed to be won. Without hesitation, he stabbed his left hand palm and felt a small pained groan left his mouth. Not enough. Still in this seeking illusion. He SWCH his knife and stabbed his right hand palm. It really hurts. FCK, still not enough. With his hands shaking and his BLD dripping, he bites his lips, then took a deep breath, shut his eyes and stabbed his right shoulder. This time, he emitted a small pained scream. Man, how the FCK was he supposed to get out of this illusion? The pain was real. It was really hurting. The BLD was still dripping on the floor, and his vision was blurring a little. He swore, if he didn't treat himself quickly, he could and would die from BLD loss, illusion or whatever. He was not going to take the risk. He grimaced and moved towards the closet where a first aid kit laid. Minutes later, Mineta Minoru was lying in his 15-year-old body and on his old bed, thinking about his strange situation. Aries' power was rewinding things, right? A very powerful quirk, and a very dangerous once lost control, and actually rewinded everything around her. Him being the only one close to her at the time, close to her, and touching her. CK, could it be? Did she rewind time? Was that even seeking possible? Time travel? Really? Mineta scoffed. This was stupid. He almost killed himself to actually believe that this was not an illusion, or well, not a normal one at least. So, let's say Eri had the power to rewind time. Did she erase everything in the last timeline? Did everything but his mind rewind? Because he was touching her. Did the future he came from disappear? Or maybe she rewind him back in time, and that destroyed the original timeline. Man, it was complicated. Time travel quirk. Does that even exist? Mineta was smart, but he was not a quirk scientist. Or Midoriya for that matter. How on earth does a time travel quirk even work? He still didn't think that was possible, but then again, some people could become giants. Some were made of rocks, some were born with horns, some with tails, some could teleport, some could create anything out of the lipid in their body, some were explosive, some could control elements. FCK, some even had GS in their hair, so why not time travel? Still, it was strong to digest. He shuffled his head under the pillow while playing with his new-made bandages, and CLCK'd his tongue out of habit. Now, what? He knew that he had to change things if this was real, but how? Mineta was a pro-hero, but he was also a military commander, a leader. His people needed him. He had responsibilities, though he did not want to think about that. Another hour later, Mineta was still stuck in bed, thinking about how Aries' powers made him travel in time and how the kid actually lost control, or rather why she lost it. Deku. No. Mineta snapped his eyes shut, not wanting to deal with yet another death. Didn't have the time and never had it, and he still didn't. He had had enough moping around. He had to start thinking and strategizing now. That's what he was best at. He stood up from his bed and walked towards his table, opening the drawer, took the calendar and squinted his eyes at it, taking a seat. For the sake of his mind, he decided to pretend that he really fully believed himself to be back in time, no matter how absurd that sounded. Not that absurd with quirks and all, but well. Today was Saturday, the Saturday before the start of his first high school internship. As per written in his schedule, so he was back in high school. Then, his first year? Well, at least he had some time ahead of him. Where did he do his internship again? It was so long ago. Wasn't this the 1 week stage before final exams? Like, before the end of the first term? No, but he really didn't remember where he had done his internship. Frowned and thought for a second. It was with a lady, a appealing one. Mineta had changed. He grew up and calmed his knee down a lot. That did not mean he didn't like women anymore, though still thought that they were marvelous. But he had learned how to deal with them. He had learned respect. After all, a woman was as dangerous, if not more than any other creatures, men included. He didn't treat them like vase or flower. He treated them like swords, appealing and dangerous. Mineta was a man, and every man, no, not just man, woman as well, was perverted or was a grown adult, and he had once been a teenager. No matter the respect, no matter the shyness, no one could be a saint. Besides some exceptions like asexuality and aromantism per se, though, he had to admit that he had been a creepy pervert with an unhealthy sequel drive during his teenage years. But then, war just striked, and he didn't have the time for that kind of thing anymore. Anyway, he remembered being an intern at Mount Lady's agency. Well, from now on, he had to think of every little way to change things for better. Stop the war. If this was really was not sure yet if he would tell anyone of his situation, but if there was one thing he had learned in the future, it was that no matter how smart or powerful you are, you can't do things alone. Though there were many risks coming with that decision, had to choose who to tell and what to tell. There was also the possibility of the person or people not believing and telling someone else, or locking him away in an asylum. He didn't even know if he was the only one who came back. Maybe everyone did. Unlikely. But still, that was a question for another time, though, because the main concern right now was his internship and his training as FC King, training only 3 stabs, and he was already exhausted. How the FCK could he use his second quirk if he was this weak? The use of that quirk requires a lot of things, and one of them was endurance. Won't be able to save anyone or change anything with his current predicament. He shuddered, thinking about his future hell of training. Controlling every aspect of his first quirk was one thing, but awakening and training with his second quirk was entirely something else. He searched inside his memories and remembered the way Mount Lady had disciplined him, snorted in amusement. The good time. Now, he had to wonder for a second if he must act as he did when he was young. That didn't really end up well for him, though, and he couldn't let himself have fun. Neither did he have the time, nor did he have the energy. Even if he tried to and knew that that would come as really off to people. He was a hero, not an actor, and actually acting like a jerk towards girls didn't sound well. Had changed, still a pervert, or more like just a normal person really, but a gentleman. So no, he was not going to treat girls like they were nothing more than object to win. Teenagers and their weird way of thinking. He still had 1 day before his internship, so a day to fully prepare himself. Monday came quickly, too quickly. FCK. Now was the time where he would really step outside to see that the world, that his country was not a battlefield. Time to start getting used to his new surroundings. Mineta had never been so grateful for living alone, his guardian being his very busy businessman grandpa. He had once lived with his father. Boutique did not come out well. Despite being an adult in a teen's body, he wasn't sure if he could have handled the pressure of living with someone so soon after his time travel. So yeah, he was happy to be alone. Mineta prepared himself mentally and physically. He decided to wear a simple long-sleeved dark purple shirt and a pair of black shorts, along with a tight pair of yellow gloves to hide his not really accidental injuries. He looked at the mirror and snorted. A kid, a short kid. He wasn't ugly, kinda cute even, but his stature was that of a toddler, not a teenager. Which only made his look worse on his face when he stared at his own deep eyes. He saw nothing but a burdened man, a veteran, a warrior, a look of someone who had failed people, who had killed, who was guilty and remorseful. And it didn't suit his baby face at all. He wondered for a second, if he was here, then where was his younger self? Had they merged? Or had he disappeared? A nasty guilt made its way onto his heart, but he blocked it. Mineta had not been a commander for nothing. Sacrifice had to be made. It was a hero. He had to save people no matter what happens to him or his oblivious young counterpart. That would not stop him from completing his mission, though. He still didn't fully believe that he really came back in time. Taking a very deep breath, he stepped outside his house, his bag tangled on his shoulder. Mineta looked up at the building where Mount Lady's agency was. Well, here goes nothing, he muttered to himself. He walked towards the receptionist, and realized again just how short he was him. He couldn't even be seen by the lady in the reception counter. This was way too inconvenient. Excuse me, Mineta tried politely. He heard her making a small startled sound and felt her shuffling around. Here, he signaled to the lady, slightly amused. Oh, came the surprised response as she leaned on the counter to see him. I'm sorry, I didn't notice you. What can I do for you? Mineta remembered the awful first impression he had made on the lady. He had acted as a very immature, rude and perverted teenager. It ended up with her avoiding him, while warning the other staff of his unheroic behavior, which resulted in an uncomfortable stay here. So this time, he made sure to put on his most polite and professional smile. It wasn't really all that strong, taking his career as a pro hero. Good morning, ma'am. I am the new intern from you. I'm here to meet Miss Mount Lady. Could you please inform her of my presence, if that's possible? The receptionist looked a little bit taken aback, before smiling down at him and nodding her head in agreement. Sure, she informed us of your arrival beforehand, so if you don't mind, I'm going to call her up now, she told him while pressing the calling device. After he nodded, she then smiled again at him. She is on her way down here. Thank you, ma'am. That was very helpful. Oh, by the way, I am deeply sorry for startling you earlier, but as you can see, Miss KeToshiro makes it strong for me to avoid those kinds of situations. He joked a little to lighten the atmosphere, but still made sure to stay polite. She looked surprised for a second before giggling quietly. No need to apologize. To be fairly honest with you, I did wonder for a second what you were doing here, she playfully replied. Mineta catched on to the inside joke of his childlike appearance and snorted quietly, counting the interaction as a win. Ooh, isn't this my new intern? A new but familiar voice chipped in enthusiastically. Mineta almost forgot about the all-internship thing for a minute. Keyword being almost. He turned on his right to face the youngest heroine in the top 30 of this time in person, and to think that he was now older than her. If he remembered correctly, then she was about 23 years old around this time, so yep, he was older. Not by much, only 2 years, but still his whole situation was just weird. Mount Ladison. He greeted her politely with a formal bow. A polite one, aren't you? I didn't expect that, she laughed. Wasn't she just blunt? She probably knew him, what with the sport festival and his actions, and had some files on him too. Follow. He did so without much of a fuss. He turned to the receptionist first though, smiling at her. I gotta go, ma'am. It was nice talking to you, but this childman of myself has to go off being a hero. He joked with a chuckle, pulling a laugh out of her. It was nice indeed. Have a nice stay. That was definitely different. Well, he guessed that it was a good thing. Have a nice day, ma'am. He bowed before running after the pro hero. He looked around him, feeling a little bit nostalgic. This room was once on top of his list of scary places and filled nightmares. He laughed internally at the thought. Man, was he childish right now? This place was certainly the least scary on his mind, and he was pretty sure that if he behaved, Mount Lady would let him train, instead of chaining him up. So before everything, let's talk a little. The pro hero's voice got him out of his mind. Right, his internship, sure. The heroine stared at him for a second, and he would lie if he said that it didn't make him uncomfortable. The only people who ever stared at him were either his enemies or his closest allies and friends. After all, he didn't frequent just anyone, not out of lack of will, but more like lack of time, and he was a shadow. A hero who did not interact much with civilians, though he had been famous. Too famous for his taste. Having a new element who was neither his enemy nor his friend staring at him made his skin itch. Wanting to shape a sword and be in a defensive position so he could observe carefully if respected the pro hero who took him for his internship. But he just was not close to hero well. He guessed it was a good training for his mind to get used to all of this. Sue, why do you want to be a hero? She finally asked. Not much different from last time. Though it did make him think, why did he want to be a hero? He knew why he was a hero, but he was not really sure about the first reason. He knew that as a teenager, his ambition was to be famous and to have girls butt like anyone else. He had once been a child, an innocent kid wanting to be a hero. Yeah, now he remembered. I want to be a hero to make you proud and to save people. I want people to be happy so that no one ever cries like me. Childish indeed. Now back to the question. Should he be honest, or should he answer like the last time? This freaking situation was delicate, but before that, that's a good question, Mount Ladison. And I know it may be rude, but can I ask something first? His interlocutor widened her eyes in surprise, and his mind quickly caught up to why she was taken aback to him and his diplomat self for being too polite in a tight situation. He was a teenager now, not a pro-hero negotiating. After a blank, the heroine nodded at his request though now. His question seemed like a waste, since he knew the most likely answer, but he still needed to check. Do you think that we could win this? Because I say, we can, he said, his eyes sharp and serious. Do you all think that we could win this? Because yes, I say we can, because we are heroes. The only answer he got was a confused blink. Nope, she didn't come back. It was very unlikely anyway, since she died. His eyes sombered at the unnecessary and unwelcomed thought. He quickly resorted to his perfect poker face though, so much that he was sure that she didn't caught his little slip. After all, not even his closest people could see the part of him that wasn't the strong leader, at least, not often in the future. He didn't let those kind of dark thinking get on his way. He had always been the strong and reliable commander, even if he hadn't wanted to. Sorry for that mount. Ladison, I felt like the atmosphere was too heavy, so I thought about asking if you knew about that phrase, so that I could relax a little. I found it on internet, and it became one of my favorite quotes, so I kind of take it seriously. Sorry about the confusion. He smiled sheepishly, lying through his teeth like a pro. Sure, he was no actor, but he did have some skills. He couldn't change his personality, but he knew very well how to play and lie. You found it on the internet? She hummed. Yes, I did. Maybe I read it in a book online. I don't remember. It's not the original quote though, just inspired, since I modified it. He did not want to be caught on his lie later on if Mount Lady ever searched that up. So, why were you so serious when asking that, then? She questioned with a raised eyebrow. It was just an opening to my question. That quote is related to a story about heroes and war. But as I said, I was a little tense, and I guess I messed it up. I don't even know why I asked about that. It was very unlikely for you to know. I apologize. The older-looking one just shook her head. It's okay. So what was your original question then? She wondered. Yeah, it was somehow related to your question. Miss, I want to ask your opinion. He paused a bit. What is a hero to you? Mount Ladison. A silence took place. The pro-hero looked slightly surprised, and then she frowned. A hero, I think, a hero is someone who pushes through strongship to help people. Someone who fights for those who can't. Noble. Helpful, that's what a hero is, if you ask me. I see. Then I guess I can answer your question now. To be honest with you, my reason for wanting to be a hero is nothing like Fatty want fame and maybe a girl too. But my first reason as a kid was to make someone proud. Though I changed it then again, through my classmates. I guess I got inspired. So I want to save people, to save as many as he could. Not just to look cool, I also want to be a hero. He smiled. He had been inspired by his classmates, so that was true. DMN Aizawa, why on earth was the kid so different from his files? You did not expect that at all. Aizawa had warned her of him being a little creepy pervert, not a polite and smart kid. His question had taken her aback, and what with his perfect poker face. After seeing her confused, he just looked at her blankly, which was extremely unnerving. She could not get a read on him. Sure, he did mention that he wanted to look cool and to be famous, but the way he said, maybe a girl too, made no sense. He was a pervert, and if there is one thing that was mentioned more than once in his file set, was that he had no respect for the girl's space, and Privacish had heard he wanted a HRM, so this made absolutely no sense at all, and if he really was that much of a pervert, then why didn't he check her out shamelessly? And not to brag, but she knew she was appealing. She took pride in her beauty. He did take a look, but it was more of him just observing than anything else. She stared at him once again. You are different from the last time in a sport festival, she finally said. He didn't look surprised and shrugged. I'll have to say, Mount Ladison, that I'm still very much a big pervert, if that's what you are asking. He smirked. But I decided to take my training seriously. I figured my classmates would and will come back from their internship stronger. And I'm already the weakest. I don't want that gap to be even bigger. I've been thinking about it the whole weekend. Didn't get much sleep. He sighed, pointing out his face, and sure enough, he had some little bags under his eyes. I thought to myself that it was an occasion to work with an appealing heroine, and well, I changed my mind, not about you being appealing per se, but about the occasion in question. It's not an occasion to check out some girls. It's an occasion to get stronger. He finished with a huff. You blinked, a little bit shocked by his explanation. So he really was taking this seriously. Oh well then. Good. So let's get started then, she exclaimed, standing up. She so wanted to see his face when she'd tell him about his training. She giggled maniacally. She blinked, looking down at Mineta with widened eyes, meeting his own pair of deadpan purple. When she had told him about cleaning with an evil grin, he hadn't even bat an eyelash, facepalming at her. Well then, I guess I expected it. What with humbling this little gremlin, and with your reputation. He snorted, looking more than amused. As you were saying, let's get started, and with that, he left her dumbfounded, to go cleaning while whistling randomly. It looked like she was in for a surprise with her new intern, and she felt like that wasn't a bad thing. Mineta sighed while doing the last of his chores. The meeting with Mount Lady was somewhat different from the other time, But some things never changed, like the cleaning part for example. He was done earlier than the first time, but that was to be expected, since he didn't lose it by complaining or checking out every girl who passed by. He took his time to get to Mount Lady, stretching a little bit to relax his muscles. "You are done?" asked his employer, smiling at him. "Yep." He hummed, then looked at the heroine directly in the eyes. "I'm pretty sure you have a training room somewhere here, right? I finished everything and I still have some time. Would you mind if I use it?" This time, she didn't look surprised and just grinned, summoning him to follow her. He did so without hesitation. The training room was bigger than he expected. He had never been down here before, so he took the time to observe. "I figured that with that little speech of yours about getting stronger, you would ask that. Look like I was right," chirped the older-looking female from behind him. He didn't say anything but turned around to face her. A silence took place before he broke it. "So, would you train me then?" "Nah, my quirk isn't good for training little kids," she laughed at him. "But I would like to test you a little. I have some experience with hand-to-hand combat, and I think it would be useful for you." She said that to a swordsman, but then again, his body right now was F-seeking weak. "I guess you are right, but I have to warn you, miss, that I am really, really weak. But that doesn't mean that you have to go too easy on me." He smirked. "Won't dream about it, kid." Wasn't it just weird that someone younger than him called him a kid? Facing each other, Mineta and Mount Lady were both in a defensive position, observing their opponent. Yu frowned. His posture was right, almost perfect, even. "Do you have any experience with close combat?" she asked. Still on guard, the boy just smirked. "I do." He still maintained his position, but I am still physically weak. They just assessed each other for some more seconds. Yu finally started to move, realizing that Mineta won't attack first. She jumped and tried to kick him. He dodged, and made his way back, eyes sharp. "Can I use my quirk?" he asked her with a scowl. "Nah, this is a test to see your physical capability, so you'll have to do without." He didn't outright react, but within a second, he was before her, tangled upside down in a spin, and leaning on his two hands to try delivering a powerful kick. He was quick enough to reach her, so she blocked with her arms and stepped back a little, enough so she could punch him. He was sent off on the floor, a meter away. He stood up on his feet not even a second later and attacked again, jumping high above to empower his punch. This time, Yu dodged. Though his height wasn't advantageous for strength, he knew how to deal with it, jumping around and spinning. It also has its advantages, enabling him to do sneaky movements. He was light enough to move fast. They continued their little debacle for the next 15 minutes or so. Mineta was precise in his every move, and Yu was impressed. He was weak, at least physically, but he knew how to balance his body well, though sometimes he looked uncomfortable, like he wasn't used to something. Maybe he hadn't fought like this in a while. But he made it up with strategy. Actually, his fighting skill was nothing striking, but his mind was sharp enough to improvise in action. His body wasn't strong, and it looked like he was a little bit awkward, but he was smart, trying to confuse her and sometimes succeeding in doing so. "You are good," she exclaimed in a laugh. Sure, she wasn't exactly going strong on him, but she wasn't going easy either. They stopped, Mineta breathing strong, lying on the floor. "You are good, although you are weak. You don't have endurance, you tire out too easily. But God, where did you hide that brain of yours? You have changed a lot since the sports festival," she commented while seating up to be on his level. Mineta knew that he wasn't in his adult body anymore, but now, he actually felt it. Man, he hadn't fought in his short stature in ages. It was F-seeking strong. Fortunately, he had experiences, and he was smart, or Mount Lady would have beaten him up to a pulp without even trying. To actually grow stronger in a steady way, he needed to see the basics once again. So, running it was then. He had to improve his poor endurance if he wanted to save anyone. Mineta grimaced and sighed. "Oh, don't be sad, kid, you did well," his mentor suddenly said in front of him. "Thanks, but actually, I think that I need to train my endurance. Then, I'll see what to do about my fighting skills later." Mount Lady nodded. "You are right, we need you to be able to not tire out too easily. I think I have an idea for that. So tomorrow, we'll change your cleaning duty a little," she told him with a devilish smile. He grimaced in response. It seems like he was in for a lot of work, and he was right. After doing his first morning jog of this life, which left him out of breath and sweaty, she assigned him to a different kind of cleaning. When she told him that she would change his cleaning duty a little, then that was a very big understatement. He showed up the morning after their fight, and she overloaded him with intense physical chores. It could not be called cleaning anymore at this point. He wasn't complaining though, if anything, he was quite grateful. He needed the training. Yu still found herself surprised even when she knew that the short boy was somehow different, because Mineta did not complain, not even a little, about his chores. She assigned him to cleaning the ceiling of the whole building with the help of his quirk. and with a time setting if he failed to finish on time, then he would have to redo it all. She also tasked him with a lot more chores and actual training with the same rules and physical activities. She had to admit that the short little boy was a genius in using his quirk. He was creative and efficient. He was done a while later than the day before it was already night time. Still, he stayed behind to train a little more. He really wasn't kidding when he said that he wanted to grow stronger. Mount Lady could respect that. Actually, the rest of her staff did as well. They all seemed to appreciate his strong work, and the fact that he helped them with some things, and was a small sympathetic humorist, only strengthened the matter. Mineta had only been here for 2 days. Why did he change so much? She trusted Aizawa's judgment and his warnings. Heck, she had seen with her own 2 eyes how the kid acted during the sport festival, so where did that change really come from? His explanations made sense. Still, sure, he was sometimes acting like a brat, on purpose, but you sighed. Anyway, now, she was supervising his training, watching as he fought an invisible opponent. He was great, but he had many weaknesses that he seemed to be aware of, which was good. I'll see if I can call up a friend to train with you a little tomorrow. He would be a way better teacher than me in hand-to-hand. She commented. Mineta glanced at her with curiosity. Really? He asked, stopping his training, coming to his bag to fetch a bottle of water. That would be very helpful, Mount Lady-san. I can't exactly let you walk out of this internship without anything now, can I? Mineta snorted while gulping down some water. I believe you can, miss. He chuckled, finding something funny. She blinked, slightly confused. Seeing that, the kid just shook his head. Don't mind me. He smiled, then the second after, he seemed thoughtful. Mount Lady-san, she raised an eyebrow, motioning him to continue. I have something to ask. I was wondering if I could leave now. I have some errands to do in Hasu. He asked with a sigh. A confused pause. Well, as long as you come back on time, I don't really see the problem. Though, you will go on patrol with me tomorrow, so make sure to finish all your business because we will be very busy. Patrol. That didn't happen the last time. If anything, Mount Lady chained him up inside the building. It seems like he was doing a pretty good job with his internship up until now. All right, Mount Lady-san. Good night. He bowed politely before leaving. There weren't many people inside the building, but he still greeted the ones he came across. As he was stepping a foot outside, he sighed. It was time to act. Mineta traveled the night away to reach Hasu. He knew that he didn't have to do much concerning this incident since Midoriya, Todoroki and Ida took care of everything. It's not like he could do more. He was days too late to help Lita's brother and the other casualties of Stain. But he did know that one hero died the night of the Namu's attack. Thank God for his good memory. He didn't remember who, but that was just trivial. At least, he remembered the location, where most of the Nomus appeared. The pro-hero had been buried under the ruins, and he had to stop that. The guy probably had family and friends. If he could at least do that much, then he could say that he didn't come back for nothing. Mineta slipped quietly in Hasu. It has been 4 days since his time travel, though he still didn't want to call this situation that, after all, he could very much be in a coma and dreaming. Or maybe he had just gone mad. That wasn't impossible anyway. He still didn't fully believe that he had traveled back in time. Could you blame him? It would take something else to make him realize that. For now though, dream or not, he was going to do his job as a hero, and he would make sure to not have unnecessary regrets. A little purple head walked around a specific area, no one noticing him. The boy observed his surroundings carefully, noting that there were some heroes around. No one saw him approaching them, or hiding close by. No one saw him when the attack started, no one saw him when they were evacuating the civilians, and absolutely no one expected his presence when he showed himself. Mineta was good with stealth. He was very good. His body helped in the matter, so it wasn't really strong to slip past the heroes. He tensed slightly when the attack started. This was real, wasn't it? It looked real, so did he really? Mineta shook his head, chasing away all the unnecessary thoughts. The monsters that he was so used to deal with appeared the same way they always did. Monstrous they were. The saddest part was that they were once humans or well, corpses. Endeavor wasn't there yet, so the heroes had to deal with the Nomus without him. One of the heroes was thrown meters away, close to his hiding spot, before standing up again to help his colleagues. He stayed still, waiting for his chance to help because he knew he couldn't do much, even with his quirk, and he wasn't going to use it, so it would be particularly difficult. He did not want trouble so early in the timeline, and using his quirk without a proper license would be exactly asking for that, even if he did act like a hero. He prepared himself, eyes sharp and body ready, waiting for it. A heavy blast destroyed a part of the building nearby. And one hero in particular was still under the trajectory, not fast enough to dodge, frozen in horror. Mineta didn't lose any time and acted. He pounced in without hesitation, fully ready to save the day. His small body allowed him to reach the pro on time, and his powerful jump allowed them to get far out of the way. A second later, he was on top of the hero who was supposed to die, having pushed him away. The loud crash left his ears ringing. His eyes were a little blurry from all the dust around. That was close. Man, that was really close, a little late, and he would have died with the pro hero. He looked down to check on the man. He was breathing strong, his eyes still closed in fear. A little relieved sigh escaped Mineta when he saw that the hero was alive and kicking, if not a little injured from the fight with the Noma's shore. He had done many rescue missions before, but that didn't mean he was any less stressed with those. After all, he valued human lives greatly, even when he had been forced to play with those. He redirected his attention to the battle before him. Thankfully, Endeavor arrived not long after, so it was safe to say that he and everyone else survived. An alarmed gasp snapped his attention back from the fight to the man under him. He was watching Mineta with his eyes wide open, disbelief, relief and fear clear in them. Holy shit, kid, FCK, what are you doing here? And what FCK? He yelled in one breath. Mineta grimaced and moved to push himself off the panicked hero. He then placed a strong and steady hand on the man's shoulder, keeping him from having a panic attack. He looked directly in his eyes, clearing his throat to speak. Sir, you should calm down. You are alive. I am alive, so all is good. The pro hero paused, literally. He froze and just stilled. A second, 2, 3. An almost full minute later, and he was still unresponsive, so much that Mineta was starting to worry. He knew that the man needed time to process, but it was still concerning. And they needed to move out of the way, to safety. Endeavor was still fighting, so they had to get out. Far from the battlefield, he did not want to be buried under anything. Thank you very much. The other heroes couldn't really see them from their position, so the only ones capable of rescuing them were themselves. Sir, please, we have to get out of here and move out of the fight. He said urgently and firmly. He didn't want to push the man too strong, but he needed the both of them alive. That seemed to do the trick, since his eyes snapped back to life. Oh FCK, you are right. Mineta was lifted off the ground and thrown to the hero's shoulder. He CLC'd his tongue. That was unnecessary, but he would do with that for now. As they were settling not far from the other pro heroes, Mineta tapped the man's shoulder. Excuse me, sir. I think you can put me down now. He stated a little bit dryly. The pro hero startled before doing so, a sheepish look on his face. Sorry, kid, I just acted in the moment. Mineta just shrugged, then smiled. It's okay, are you all right? The hero widened his eyes for a second, before smiling gently at him. Man, he really was treated like a kid. I'm fine, kid, Justy. He was interrupted when the other pros came running to them, all panicked and fussing. FCK, I thought you died back there. Are you okay? What is the kid doing here? Are you both all right? What happened? You aren't injured, are you? Man, they should calm down a little. Mineta tuned them out and directed his attention to Endeavor instead. He was winning the fight. It would only be a matter of minutes, and after that, he could be fully relieved. He blinked when heavy hands were placed on his shoulders. Hey, kid, you all right? Asked one of the heroes, sitting up to be on his level. He nodded simply. When he confirmed that, the man continued with a more severe tone. Great, now, just what are you doing here? Shouldn't you have evacuated? Mineta stayed silent for a moment, then he sighed. I was near here when the attack started. It was too much of a chaos, so I didn't have much time to evacuate with the civilians. I decided for my own safety to hide. He explained calmly to the panicked heroes. All of them just stared at him with slight shock. A blank. You saved my life. The man he saved started quietly from where he was standing at the back. The others turned around, listening to him. You saved my life, but you could have lost your Sivan though. You did it. That was crazy. FCK, I would be dead if it wasn't for you. And you could have died with me. That was just insanely reckless, but it was heroic. Oh, it has been so long since he had last been praised for being heroic. When you are at war, you just don't receive much compliments. There was no time. Yet, he felt a warm feeling invading his sin at the praise. That was nice. Just, what happened? Asked the still crouching hero in front of him, confusion painting his voice. The guy he rescued started telling them about his almost dying experience and how exactly Mineta saved him. At this point, everybody just looked at him like he had accomplished a miracle, and that he had been very stupid in doing so. How old are you again? Questioned one of them in disbelief. Mineta blinked, then frowned. This was about his stature. He looked younger than he was. So they were incredulous about his age. Geez. Hey, another one interrupted. I actually know you. His voice a pitch higher in recognition. You are a kid from you. A collective shocked chaos erupted. You are right, he is the little pervert. Now that you mention it. Yeah, at least they knew he was from you. And now. The man in front of him calmed them down, then turned to him once again. So you're a hero in training, he sighed. Yes, sir, I was just passing by. I had some errands to do in Hasu. When I saw one of you in danger, my body moved by itself. Of course, he lied. What else do you expect him to do? Tell them that he knew that someone was going to die because he came from the future. No way. Though, a part of what he just said was true. Your action today was brave, but it was stupid. Next time, let the adults take care of it. Scolded the hero with a harsh tone. Excuse you, I'm a 25-years-old war veteran, Mineta mumbled inside his head, more amused than bitter really. And if he didn't interfere, then a life would have been lost. Not that he blamed the man for saying that, so with no better option left, he just shrugged. Right. Mineta nodded, although he had no intention of letting the adults take care of it. Anyway, we thank you for today. Your help was appreciated. The older man smiled. A crashing sound attracted their attention to the battle. Endeavor had finished the job, standing proudly beside the Namu's body. Like Mineta had predicted, or more like he had known, the fight ended with their victory and safety. Everybody cheered, celebrating their triumph. This time, he didn't push away the relieved feeling washing over his body. He had done it. He had saved the pro-hero. He had saved a life, the first and certainly not the last man. He guessed that all the time travel thing had affected him more than he had expected. What is a student doing here? A deep, gruffy voice pulled him out of his thoughts. He turned around, knowing who it was. Endeavor, Todoroki's father. One-time #1 hero. A vision of his death passed through his eyes for a moment, before he immediately shrugged it off. Time to deal with some business, with the heroes, with the police and everything. Mineta sighed wearily. Endeavor-san. He greeted politely after finishing his reports and explanations to the heroes, or more like to Endeavor and the police. Mineta found himself dropped in the Hasu General Hospital. We have to deal with some sequels of the incident, and it's better for you to get a checkup. So here we are. After that, we'll drop you home. I'm sorry to interrupt, sir, but I think it would be better to inform Mount Ladison about this. I'm doing an internship under her, so we naturally have to, he said with a polite smile, seeing as the man was going to speak more. The pro-hero he had saved, who somehow insisted on being the one to watch over him, blinked. Is that so? All right then, I'm gonna do that now. You go see the nurse over there. The man ordered, pointing a finger at a brown-haired man in white who waved at him, before leaving. Mineta grimaced. He wasn't really injured, or well, not from the Nomus incident at least, but he was still very much so from his little unfortunate time-traveling incident. This, he thought, is going to be a pain to deal with. He got himself over to the nurse and smiled. Hi, sir, so I know that there are many people who need tending more than me. After all, it wasn't exactly a small incident, so please don't mind me. You can go take care of someone who needs it, if you want, because there is no need to worry about me. I didn't get hurt during the incident. His interlocutor deadpanned at him. I don't buy its scary look that clearly every doctor could use painted on his face. Are you trying to avoid your checkup, kid? That's a little bit suspicious, don't you think? DMN those medical people and their instinct. He wasn't Midoriya, for God's sake. He did not hurt himself on a daily basis. Certain people would completely disagree with that, seeing as he could be worse than the symbolic hero. It's not, he tried to explain, but was interrupted with a death glare. Now, kid, you are right about the not small incident, but checking you for injuries won't take much time, especially if you really are as alright as you say you are. The nurse twitched, his tone leaving no room for argument. Mineta sighed. He was too tired to find a way out of this, so he relented. Done arguing. The small boy in form only nodded wearily. Great, follow me then, so we can be done with this. The man smiled sweetly. He followed him reluctantly. Man, why did every doctor or nurse, or whoever worked in the medical field, always win those kinds of arguments? Did the villains also have to deal with those downright terrifying people? And Mineta was not easily scared, at least. Not anymore, but they somehow managed to terrify him. Heroes couldn't be the only one who had to support that. It would be strongly fair. They were actually in a small white room, an uncomfortable silence in the air. The nurse stared at Mineta, and Mineta stared back at him. What's this? The deep, serious voice of the man cut through the tense silence of the room like a knife. FCK. Mineta knew that it was a bad idea to relent. He sighed and looked down at where the nurse was glaring. His bandages were still firmly wrapped around his injured shoulder and his two palms. He was shirtless and gloveless, since the man had asked him to take them off, which resulted in this situation. See? I told you I didn't get hurt during the incident. He joked a little. The man obviously didn't find it funny. Care to explain? Mineta winced at the tone. Look, sir, it was just a small accident. No need to be so concerned. He smiled sheepishly. What kind of incident? The man asked coldly. It doesn't look broken or dislocated, so it has to be something else. Well, he was in trouble, wasn't he? The nurse didn't look like he would drop it. And, it doesn't look like you have changed those. Did you patch yourself up? Hands were on him the second after, gently but firmly analyzing his bandages. It looks good, great even, but it's not the work of a professional. Mineta felt a little bit offended at that. Sure, he wasn't a doctor or anything, but he had been through a war, so basic medical knowledge was mandatory. And he could do a very good job with that. He blamed this on his small, inexperienced and injured body. He was pretty sure that he or his older body, that is, could patch himself up and others like a pro, even when hurt a slight pinch on his cheek pulled him away from his thoughts. So, the man said, expecting. So hat? Explain. Now. The man started removing his shoulder's bandages. We need to change those. It could affect your wounds, unless you just wear bandages for show. The nurse stated sarcastically. He would have used the excuse if it wasn't for the fact that the man in front of him was far from gullible. What's your name, by the way? The man asked as he was doing his job. My name is Mineta Minoru. It's nice to meet you, Mr. The name's Takahashi Haruki. I can't say that I'm very glad to meet you, not like this. Takahashi snorted when the bandages were removed. A sharp gasp left the older one. Well, Mineta expected that reaction. Why the FCK do you have a stab wound? A F-seeking deep stab wound. The nurse hissed. How could he explain this? And why didn't you F-seeking change these bandages? If you could do this good, then why? You do know that you could get an infection because of this, don't you? Hey, it's not like he had the time. Or, to be honest, Mineta had been so used to the rough treatment of war that he just forgot that he wasn't on time-scheduled basis or that he could get some medical attention because the injured were not as many as in the future. Or more importantly, that he didn't have the same stamina and recovery prowess as before. Well, oh yeah, a still very angry nurse was on his tail to search for information. Okay, after you change my bandages, I'll explain everything, so please Takahashi-san, calm down. He sighed while massaging his head with his free hand. The poor Takahashi-san let out a weary breath. You better, and you need to get stitches for that. Go see a doctor after this. I don't have the necessary tools here. He muttered in reply as the older man proceeded while glaring at his 3 stab wounds which would most likely scars. Mineta managed to find the excuse he had been searching for. It was pretty easy with a mind like his. He may not be a genius, but he was smart, in his own way. He tried to cover up all the possible holes of his story in the little time he had left. Takahashi had had a pretty eventful week, with all the incident related to the hero killer. They were all running around, hyper busy. He had been assisting the main doctors many times and had seen in front lines the damages that the psychotic killer had done. Now imagine his stress when Hasu was faced with Nomus's attack. The damages they did were unmeasurable. So add that to the request his friend asked of him. Apparently, the guy had been saved by a high schooler hero in training during the fight against the monsters, and Takahashi was F-seeking grateful that his friend was alive. The hero had ran to him to ask him to make sure the boy didn't sustain any injuries. The pro-hero trusted him a little bit too much. He had been on a break when his friend had asked him. There were many casualties, so if you weren't obviously injured, then they would take care of you later. And of course he accepted. It was his job anyway. He had been greatly surprised when he had seen a little purple head beside his friend. The little brat didn't look a day out of elementary school. And he almost got a heart attack when he saw not 1, not 2, but 3 very deep fresh stab wounds that he didn't even get during the incident. Now he was waiting for the little rascal to explain himself. It was a pretty stupid incident. Mineta started with a tense voice. What kind of incident? He repeated his earlier question. The kid sighed. Well, I discovered something quite new with my quirk. What? You see, those are my quirk. The little man explained, taking off one of his hairswell. Takahashi expected that in fact. It was pretty obvious. They can stick to anything beside myself. Anywhere for as long as I like, as long as I'm alive and healthy, and that's it. Or well, that was supposed to be it. But this weekend, this Saturday to be precise, I was thinking about training. That's not something I do often. I only decided to take my hero goal seriously only recently. So yeah, and well, I did train. My quirk isn't the most useful quirk in a fight, but if I want to be a hero, then I have to know how to defend myself, even if I'm only a support. Because there are just some situations where you can't run from a fight. Takahashi agreed. Support or not, sometimes the situation just forces you to fight. So I thought, really strong, about how to use my quirk in a fight. A direct fight where I can't run around to use it with efficiency. And this happened. The little boy somehow changed the form of the round in his hand. It transformed onto a purple sharp knife. Haruki startled a little, seeing the dangerous weapon though. He was starting to get the picture. I couldn't control it. It just happened. Two knife appeared in my hand, and I managed to stab my palms with it. Mineta continued with a grimace, like he was reminiscing the whole experiment. The knife in his hand returned to its original form. Well, Takahashi understood that. The kid surely panicked, especially when he already knew how his quirk works, but it suddenly changed. And the shoulder. The nurse frowned. He did understand why he stabbed his palms, but with his shoulder. A sheepish expression appeared on the little brat, and Takahashi groaned. I did something stupid after calming down and treating my wounds. I decided to, experiment, to see if it was, well, real air. I was still a little bit out of it, and I didn't think twice, so it resulted in this. He finished his story, pointing out his shoulder. Takahashi sighed and then snorted. The kid sure was troublesome, but he was kind of funny in a way. God, you are a troublesome one, aren't you? FCK, you could die with those kind of actions. Just, next time, don't go experimenting alone on your quirk. Understood? He said harshly. Mineta nodded obediently. Good, now get dressed, then you can go. I still have work to do now. My break is over. Mineta's eyes widened comically as he looked at the nurse. You were on a break. Yeah. And you took the time to take care of me. There was something in his tone that made Takahashi's heart go soft. Don't sweat it, kiddo. I just did my job. And it just happened that the hero you saved is a friend of mine, so it's also a way to thank you. He smiled reassuringly, and the second after, stared at him sternly. Don't go around doing stupid things like that, all right? I'm grateful that you saved him, but that was reckless. First, you stab yourself, then after that, you go on your way to get crushed under a building. Mineta flinched slightly before laughing softly. Right, okay. I'll try to be careful from now on. He smirked slightly. TCH, you stupid youngsters heroes. I remember when I was a kid with Haruto. He was so reckless. F-seeking wannabe hero. Takahashi mumbled. Haruto. That's Ironside's real name. He sighed. Oh. Yeah, now you can go. I still have work. Be careful from now on. Mineta nodded and smiled genuinely at him, before bowing and leaving after a quiet, good night. Takahashi shook his head with a small smile when Mineta disappeared. Kids were stupid these days. God, that was tiring. Mineta was rightfully tired. Dealing with a scary nurse does that to you as he was getting himself a can and a juice machine. He bumped into someone on his way back. Mineta? A monotone but somehow surprised voice came from above him. A voice he recognized. Well, FCK, this wasn't part of the plan. What plan? His mind uselessly remarked. Mineta grimaced as he looked up at Todoroki F-seeking Shoto in some hospital clothes. He smiled as nonchalantly as he could, not wanting to be nostalgic and trying to keep his emotions in check. Of all F-seeking people, it had to be him. Ah, Todoroki, what a surprise. He acted slightly stunned. Sit. He didn't even know how he talked to Todoroki back then, if they ever talked at all. What are you doing here? Ah, still as blunt as ever. I was in Hasu, figured. I had some errands to do and got tangled up with the fiasco. The heroes wanted me to have a checkup. Though I'm okay. I just saw Midoriya's message, by the way. Are you lot alright? Todoroki stiffed and averted his eyes. Ida is still unconscious, but other than that, we are okay. Well, that's good. An awkward silence settled between them and Mineta sighed. Man, this was weird. And you? With that whole mess, you okay? You look physically fine, beauty, It was pretty messed up. The shorter male stated as he watched Todoroki get some drinks. The heterochromatic male didn't say anything for a whole minute, and it became even more awkward. FCK, Todoroki really wasn't good with social interaction at this time, was he? Yeah, you shouldn't ask, the boy finally said. Mineta blinked, confused. Why on earth did the kid sound so hesitant? And Todoroki was just that, a kid, no matter how he looked at it. He didn't have the same eyes as Mineta, and it definitely wasn't the future Todoroki. A vulnerable kid, wow. Mineta's protective hero instinct kicked in. Why shouldn't I? Todoroki looked surprised for a second, then glared at him. You never cared before, so why now? And you shouldn't. It's better that way. Why would it be better? He ignored the taunt for his younger counterpart. Because it is. Not socially apt much. Mineta decided to take a different approach. He CLC'd his tongue. What happened exactly? What makes the strong Todoroki say something like that? The kid flinched and glared some more. What do you know? We never talk. Touché, that was kinda true, but well, Mineta shrugged and stared at Todoroki. The taller male averted his eyes and clenched his fists. Ida's doctor came in. He said that it was possible for him to never recover from his hand injury, and Midoriya also has some scars on his hands. Shoto said bitterly. Oh, also 2 of your close people got injured in the hand. Is that why you say I shouldn't care? Mineta asked. He wanted to laugh because that was pretty messed up. Todoroki was really vulnerable at this time. He was met with silence, and it was enough of an answer. Mineta couldn't help it. He snorted not mockingly or anything, but it was just funny that for all his smarts, Todoroki had the self-emotional understanding of a child. Mineta was one to talk. He wasn't exactly the most sane person around. Todoroki glared fiercely at him, surely thinking that he was made fun of. Sorry, it's just that you feel like you are cursed or something. Sure, it's kinda unlucky, but come on. Todoroki tensed even more, if that was possible. Hey, I ain't mocking you, I promise. It's just that you have some similarities with a friend of mine and I myself. Look, for all my opinion is worth, I don't think you are cursed. The taller one looked like he was going to protest, but Mineta shook his head. Are they the only people you care about? Todoroki paused, widening his eyes. There was a blank once again. Man, talking with Todoroki sure wasn't easy. No, he finally said, and Mineta nodded. See. How about you check up on those others you care about, and see if they are injured on their hands? That would be your answer for whether you are cursed or not. Mineta smiled. Todoroki looked pretty shocked at that, and looked at him with wonder. Now, you said Midoriya and Ida were here, right? Just wish them a good recovery from me. Same goes for you. We'll see each other at school. I have to go now though. Bye Todoroki, and good night. He waved at him, before sprinting down the hallway. FCK, Mineta brushed his face with his hands and CLCK'd his tongue as he leaned his back on the wall, a little bit troubled. He heavily breathed and calmed down a few seconds later. Who could have thought that seeing one of his former classmates would bother him so much? Mineta understood the fact that he was in his teenage body, and for all his mind, his body was making him react intensively to things, since he didn't have much control over it. It would be a big, fat lie if he said that he wouldn't have been affected in his original body, but he knew that if he had been, then he wouldn't have felt this as strong as right now. Mineta Gachian! A loud voice came from afar, a voice that he knew very well by now. He turned around and was engulfed in a bone-crushing hug. What the FCK? He struggled for a second and pushed the person off of him. A blonde woman with blue eyes and long wavy hair was kneeled in front of him. Mount Lady-san. What's going on? What's going on? You were in Hasu. You were in danger, she exclaimed, though he knew she was exaggerating. Mineta laughed out loud. I'm all right, Mount Lady-san. It was an interesting experience. Mount Lady pouted and then sighed. It's kinda weird that the day you choose to go to Hasu is the exact day the villains decided to attack. She frowned. What can I say? I guess it's the Class 1A's luck or bad luck. I mean, first the Est incident, and now, not 1, nor 2, nor 3, but 4 students of the class were in Hasu. I swear troubles follow us, he snorted. 4 students, you are right, troubles do follow you. She snickered. Well, let's go now. We still have many things to do tomorrow, so let's call it a night. Sure. Mineta agreed easily. He blinked when he saw the man he had saved standing behind Mount Lady, looking at him with concern. Have you seen Takahashi? What did he say? Are you sure you are all right? He fretted slightly. Oh, come on, Ironside, my intern is strong, don't worry so much. You chuckled. Mineta nodded with a smile. Thank you for worrying, Ironside-san, but Takahashi-san already did his checkup. I didn't sustain any injuries from the incident. He reassured him politely. That did seem to work as the pro-hero nodded. See, I told you so. Mount Lady retorted a little bit too smugly. Mineta rolled his eyes at their display. Thanks again, Ironside-san, Mount Lady-san, and I will be on our way now. The youngest-looking boy turned to the woman for confirmation, and said woman nodded in agreement. He is right, Ironside. Like I said, we'll call it a night. Ironside nodded in understanding before kneeling in front of Mineta. Thank you again, kid. Without you I'd probably be dead. Be careful out there, yeah? Mineta just smiled at him. All right, Ironside-san. Or should I say Haruto-san? He joked easily. Haruto blinked then barked a laugh. You are something, kid. I'll take that as a compliment. Mineta answered cheekily, which made the 2 pro-heroes smile in amusement. All right, you two, thank you for notifying me on his whereabouts. Ironside, we'll be going now. Saw good night. Mount Lady smiled sweetly, and then turned around to leave with a wave. Good night, Ironside-san. It was a pleasure meeting you and Takahashi-san. He bowed before following Yu's steps. When you said you were going to take your goal and training seriously, I didn't expect you to literally go save a life. Mount Lady commented once they were settled in her car. She had felt her heart skip a beat when she had heard of what happened in Hasu, and knowing that the little intern was there. After all, he was her responsibility as long as he was under her. She had tried to calm down her panicked staff when she had informed them of Mineta's whereabouts, and she had been even more anxious when she had received a call from one of her acquaintances dispatched in Hasu. She had feared the worst because, even though Mineta was smart and resourceful, he was still a kid. and facing no miss or even Stain the hero killer would have left him heavily injured or possibly dead. Her relief had been palpable when she had been informed of his safety, and she had been very surprised when she heard about his actions. She still didn't know whether to scold him or praise him for his heroic deeds. You didn't expect the cowardly boy to change this much in so little time. Sure, he had been different, and he did take his training seriously, so his words weren't just empty promises, but she really didn't expect it to be to this extent. The boy just shrugged at her words. Neither did I. I pretty much just acted in the heat of the moment, although I still did think rationally. It's not like I did something illegal. You didn't, but it was very reckless. I know, and I don't regret it, but you can scold me as much as you want. He smiled. Mount. Lady sighed and shook her head. I won't. You already had enough of that by now, and you do seem to know that it was stupid. She paused. Are you all right, though? A silence answered her, and she frowned. She suddenly heard him click his tongue and let out a heavy sigh. I am. I didn't get injured during the attack. Beauty have something to tell you. Well, that got her worried. What is it? She asked neutrally. You see, I didn't get hurt during the fight. Beauty did before it. What? What? Well. Then he proceeded to tell her about his quirk incident, and this time, she gaped at him slightly. And when, exactly, were you going to say that to me? She told him, pronouncing each syllable heavily. Mineta's sweat dropped. I don't know. You don't know? She smiled dangerously. Okay, I'm sorry. I was just thinking about how and when to tell you. You let out an infuriated sigh. Her face painted with exasperation. And you trained like that with those injuries? Are you a freak, Mineta? No, I don't think so, he deadpanned. God, you really are something, aren't you? She laughed in disbelief. I'll take that as a compliment. He joked again, albeit hesitantly. So, you did see the nurse. What did he say? He told me I needed stitches though. I think seeing Recovergirlson and letting her use her quirk would be much more efficient and quick. You thought about it for a moment. I'm tempted to just let you rest for the next few days and not let you do any training or take you on patrol, just to punish you for your very stupid actions. She smiled. You won't. I could, and I would. Mineta stared at her, then sighed. I'll respect that, if that really was your decision. He said honestly, which completely threw her off. She blinked once, twice. Wow, this boy was unpredictable. I'll respect it and won't force you to train me, but I will train myself without any help, because I have something to accomplish. Mount Latison, he continued seriously. Unpredictable indeed. She couldn't help it. She laughed loudly. Wow, Mineta, you are entirely something else. He blinked in confusion. Am I? Yes, you are. Look, we can go see Recovery Girl first thing in the morning, then we would adapt depending on what she says, and what she can do. Mineta looked stunned for a second, and she strangely felt smug, that she wasn't the only one who could be taken aback. Thank you, Mount Latison, he said sincerely. DMN kid, always ahead of her. Even when she caught him off guard. He was still throwing her off the loop. After a good night's though pretty short sleep, Mineta woke up as early as he could. It was 4 a.m. when he changed and got himself ready for a morning jog. Since Mount Lady said that they would go early in the morning to visit Recover Girl, he made sure to wake up earlier and do his light morning workout. Mineta knew the extent of his injuries, and he knew that a light jogging wouldn't hurt him. He knew his limits pretty well, even if this was his younger body. When he came back, sweaty and breathy, but in better condition than after his jogs the day before, he carefully took a shower and changed into some clothes similar to what he had wore before minus the gloves when Mount Lady joined him. She looked pretty surprised that he was up so early. I thought that I had to go wake you up. But since you are all set and ready, I guess we can go. The trip to you. It was kind of peaceful. Mineta actually thought that going there before seeing any of his classmates would be better, since his brain would have more time and less shock to adjust. The fact that he didn't see any familiar faces other than Recover Girl was great, really great, but seeing as nurses in general could be scary when they were in their scolding mode, and we are talking about an experienced old lady here. Well, here he thought that he was done with the scolding. You'll be all right. It will leave some scars, but you won't need stitches. Recovery Girl stated after using her quirk on him. So would he be able to train and move around? Mount Lady asked from where she was leaning on the wall. The nurse turned to her and nodded. He will be all right now, though. I don't want you to experience alone with your quirk anymore. Understood, Mineta. Recovery Girl addressed him with a very sweet smile. Right. Mineta shuddered a little. Okay, I won't. He turned towards Mount Lady and glared at her, while she was snickering under her breath at his expense. Good. Though I didn't really expect you to be the one who would do reckless things. Until now, you tended to run away from dangerous situations, well, beside the peeking on girls. the old woman commented. Ah, recovery girl, you didn't see the half of it. Mount Lady laughed. Oh, the nurse looked curious. He had been very diligent with his work, and he behaved himself. I've been particularly impressed and shocked by his recent action. The younger woman explained. Nono knew where this was going, and while he was flattered by the praising words of Mount Lady, Mineta had had his dose of scary scolding for the rest of the day. He wasn't dealing with this. Ah yeah, thank you for the praise, Mount Ladyson, but we should go now. You did say that you would take me on patrol, so if you'd excuse us, recovery girlson, we will take our leave now. Thank you very much and have a good day. Mineta exclaimed in one breath, and jumped quickly to grab Mount Lady before bowing to the old nursine, dragging his temporary mentor out of the room, leaving a confused recovery girl dumbfounded. As they were leaving the school ground, walking towards Mount Lady's car, Mineta sighed and rolled his eyes. Mount Lady was laughing loudly beside him, holding her tummy and wiping her tears after recovering from her surprise at his rash action. She had been rolling on the floor with laughter, mocking him openly though playfully. I can't believe you did that, the young woman exclaimed, still out of breath, as they were entering her car. I'm done with scary nurses, first Takahashi-san and now recovery girlson. He defended himself with a grimace. You do know that they will know of your action through my and your reports, right? Mount Lady raised a brow. Of course I do, but if stopping you and delaying the spreading of what happened in Hasu got me out of recovery girl's fury, then I'd do it any other day. The pro-hero snorted at that and shook her head. Well, you were being reckless. I think you deserve the scolding. She laughed again. No, I don't. You are just a SDST Mount Ladyson, he replied dryly, though with a hint of humor. Ah, if I am an SDST, then you are a stupid meanie martyr. They spent the rest of the ride talking and teasing each other. When they returned to the agency, Mount Lady ordered him to change into his hero costume, which left him with a slight dilemma. He was now in a changing room, staring at his old and ridiculous costume. There was no way he would wear this short, it would make him look like a baby in a diaper. How did he stand up being a hero in training with the others, looking like this? Had he never felt shame? DMN, Mineta couldn't, with good conscience, let himself wear. Thish was too old to ignore the shame, so he did what he had to do. Didn't wear it. He replaced it with a pair of simple white shorts. Also decided not to wear the cap, it would only slow him down, and instead of the huge yellow gloves that goes with the costume, he supported one of his pair of tight military-like yellow gloves with black stripes on the edge that helped his hands' movements to be precise. With that out of the way, he looked at the mirror and thought that he didn't seem to be half bad without any charisma and short like a kid but not shameful. And more importantly, no diaper. After changing, Mineta joined his provisional mentor. Oh, you didn't wear your usual costume? Mount Lady asked, already in her own costume. Ah, No'll change the design once I can talk to the mechanic team of you. Eh, the older female Lafetch does that a lot. Is it a part of your change? Yes. I don't plan on wearing that anymore. He grimaced. I'm happy. I have seen the pictures. It's an eyesore. A fashion disaster. Mineta didn't say it out loud, but he completely agreed. He wasn't Aoyama, he didn't know a thing about fashion, but even he had to admit that his costume was a disaster. Can we not talk about that? He sighed. Are you embarrassed? It's okay. She teased him with an amused smile. The younger boy in appearance rolled his eyes, but smiled anyway. Let's just go on patrol, he said as he was starting to walk out of the hero's agency. Right. Patrolling with Mount Lady wasn't anything special. He had patrolled a city more times than he could count. A city full of people and life, and a city void of it, but full of ruins. Well, there were some actions though, but nothing too unusual. There was a bank burglary that broke out in the middle of the day. They took a boy as a hostage, of course, since it was Mount Lady's territory. She intervened, saved the little kid, and threw him at Mineta as she was fighting the criminals with two of her sidekicks. Now he was full in hands with a kid crying in his arms. DMN, of all things she could do, of course she would let him take care of a shaken little boy. Mineta knew how to comfort people, sure, but he was a little more awkward with children. War didn't give him the time to interact with them, at least, not with the normal ones. But he was a hero, so he had to act like it. Hey, it's okay, you are safe now. He kneeled before the crying kid. Not that he was much taller than him, but he knew that right now, the boy needed someone to look at him in the eye, and since he was looking down at his feet, sobbing quietly, then Mineta had to get on his level. The kid tried to speak between his breath. Look, Mount Lady is kicking them for being bad people now, he exclaimed at the younger, gently nudging him to look at the fight from where they were. The boy did, and his eyes shined when he saw the action, though his grip on Mineta didn't lessen. Whoa. That's what they got for hurting you. The hero in training grinned at him. Yes, she is awesome, he cheered, still shaking a little bit. Yeah, and don't forget the others, they are also helping. Yeah, they are all so cool. And you were too. Yay, what? The kid stopped to look at him with hesitation and questions. Mineta smiled gently. You were so cool and very, very courageous too. He really did think that kids could sometimes be so courageous, and the little boy before him stood up to the criminals to help his other friends. He had seen it all. But all I did was cry, like a loser, and you helped your friends, and even adults would cry when confronted with those kinds of situations. And you are not crying anymore now. That makes you even more courageous. You are not a loser, no matter if you were crying. Really, he sniffed. Want me to reveal you a secret? The little boy blinked and then nodded eagerly. The first time I was in a dangerous situation, I cried and I was 15 years old. You are no older than 8, so see, it's okay to be scared. He smirked with a wink, which earned him a little laugh. It's been so long since he last heard a kid laughing. It was good for his heart. You cry even though you are old, snickered the brat. Oi, 15 isn't old, you little duck, he scoffed, and ruffled the boy's hair playfully. The rascal stuck out a tongue at him, and he smiled. Although, the playful air between them disappeared as the kid suddenly frowned. I still didn't do anything, thought he. Are bad guys, and it's the hero's duty to do something. It's their work to protect. You were courageous enough already, and that's great. You are so much more courageous than me when I was your age. After this, we will take you back to your family and friends, and you could tell them all about how it was, okay? They'd tell you were super brave too, alright? He interrupted the boy in a flash. Okay, cool. Look, the fight is over. They won and those bad guys would go to prison. Mineta exclaimed enthusiastically. Right, thanks a lot. Catching up to the silent question, Mineta smirked. My name is Mineta, and yours? It's Keiji, Mineta, right, Keiji? Don't ever forget that you were very courageous today. What do you want to do when you are older? He tried to distract the boy from the swear words throwings mostly from the criminal's arrestation. What's that question, Mineta? I want to be a hero, duh. Keiji exclaimed smugly, of course, why though? I want to be super cool like All Might and Mount Lady. Mineta's expression shifted onto a serious one. Keiji, being a hero is cool, yes, but there is more to that work than that. Being a hero isn't only about looking cool, it's also about helping others. You can be a very good hero too. I think you have the potential. I saw you saving your friends, that's what heroes do. No matter how people see you, the important thing is to be a good person, to yourself and others. Do you understand? Keiji's eyes brightened, though he looked unsure. You mean he can help my friends and people if I became a hero? He asked slowly. You can't. That doesn't mean that you have to be strong all the time, and sometimes crying or losing is okay, as long as you stand up again, and that you are proud of yourself. Crying is okay, even as a hero, as long as you do something. Today, you cried, but you did something helping others, and that's very cool. It would have been okay even if you didn't, since it's a job for heroes. But you have to remember though, being a hero is dangerous. There are many good jobs out there that can also help a lot of people, so think well before deciding, okay? He advised with a kind grin. The little boy had listened attentively to everything he said, and now his eyes were sparkling with full-blown admiration. That was directed at him. You are so smart. Mineta-san, he shouted excitedly. Thanks, Keiji. He smiled before ruffling the kid's hair once again. A chuckle interrupted them, and they turned around to see Mount Lady smiling at them. Mineta stood up and Keiji quickly hid behind him. Mount Lady-san, good job with the fight. He congratulated the heroine. Thanks, kid. I see you made a new friend. I was right to entrust the boy to you. She proudly smiled. A little squeak came from Keiji as he stepped out of his hiding place with hesitation. Mineta shoved him gently towards his mentor. Thank you so much. Mount Lady-san, you were so cool. See, can I have an autograph? He asked, unsure. Of course. Do you have any papers or pen? Keiji's mood suddenly dropped. He shook his head, sulking. Mineta sighed and bent down to whisper something at the kid, which made his saddened face disappear immediately. Mount Lady raised a brow at the display. The teenager took a pen out of his pocket and gave it to her. Keiji approaching a little more. Can you sign on my jacket? The little boy exclaimed excitedly. She chuckled and did so without hesitation. Look, Mineta, she gave me an autograph, he said happily while dancing around the older boy. Right. Congratulations, Mineta laughed so the kid knew how to comfort people. You wasn't surprised. The little boy who had been taken as a hostage was now attached to Mineta by the hip. It was kind of funny to see the hero in training laughing awkwardly as the younger danced around him. He didn't look like he knew what to do about the obvious admiration in the little one's eyes. She didn't really want to interrupt them or drive Mineta away from his new admirer, but they still had to finish their patrol. Keiji-chan, she called, having heard his name earlier. The kid paused and looked at her with wide eyes. One of my friends here would escort you back to your family now. We still have to go and Mineta has to go with me. Keiji's eyes snapped back at Mineta. Will I see you again, Mineta-san? He asked with a pout. It was adorable. I'm sure we will see each other again one day. Mineta smiled. Man, it was so amusing to see him being awkward. But I want it to be soon. The child whined, which made her in turn grimace. She grinned at the scene. How about you give him your number, Mineta-chan? I'm sure if Keiji-chan here gave it to his parents, then you would be able to talk to each other soon. She suggested with a smirk. Mineta glared at her, then sighed defeatedly when he saw the puppy dog eyes that the shorter though not by much boy gave him. Keiji and one of Mount Lady's sidekicks were walking away after Mineta agreed to give the kid his number. You are starting to collect fans before you even made your debut. My lady teased him as they were now back on patrolling. And I'm starting to consider going underground. He commented with a snort. What? But I thought you wanted to be famous. The heroine exclaimed dramatically. I'm a big fan of Izawa-sensei and his work, you see? Mineta smirked. The older female just rolled her eyes. Enjoy. Chapter text. They continued to patrol until the evening, only taking a break for lunch. When they came back to Mount Lady's agency, the heroine decided to let him rest a little before having him on cleaning duty, and then finally dragging him to the training room. So since you have to improve your fighting skills, and now that you have a new way to use your quirk, I called up one of my friends to help you out. Mount Lady started. Mineta nodded. It would be very helpful to have a sparring partner with whom he could train to remaster his swordsmanship again. His mind knew all the stances and everything, but his body was way too weak and undisciplined. So how about you show me your new affinity again? The heroine suggested while eyeing him with curiosity. He sighed. Of course she would ask that. He took 2 of his hair spheres, then shaped them as 2 lean, sharp and purple swords. Mount Lady admired them with a thoughtful expression. Can you shape them differently? I mean, are swords and knives the only thing you can transform them in? You did say you experimented on them during the weekend. What did you discover? She really was curious, wasn't she? Right. Swords and knives aren't the only thing I can shape them as. I'm pretty sure that with a lot of concentration and energy, I can shape them as well. Anything you'd want as long as it's physical. They only retain the forms, the stickiness and abilities I can give them though beside my swords and For example, I can shape a gun though. That is going to be difficult as hell, but it'll only be a gun in appearances. It won't shoot anything, unfortunately. The problem I've seen is that it requires a lot. Sharp things and round things are the only forms I can do without any problems. And that's because I have a special affinity with them. The more affinity I have with the forms, the easier it is for me to do. Look. Then he proceeded to demonstrate. The swords in his hands reverted back onto that he threw on the ground. Then the grew, way bigger and bigger, until it looked like 2 giant spheres that were actually bigger than him. Mount Lady's eyes widened at the display. So, can you make them stick? That was your original quirk, right? Yes, I can. My swords can be as sharp as any sword out there, or maybe even more. But as I told you, it's not a second quirk, it's only a new ability of the original. The thing is, those and swords can stick to anything if I want them to, as that is my original quirk. Still, having a giant sticky isn't as useful on an opponent as the small ones. It's significantly slower and easier to dodge. But I can make my swords as real as it could be, and I can smooth the or make them heavier like rocks, or make them bounce like real not just on me, or even have them as futon. But doing something like that with other forms besides the stickiness is almost impossible. He explained patiently. Futon? For real. The pro-hero blinked. Mineta nodded, and did a demonstration once again. The beside him didn't change physically, but then, he jumped on one of them, and it reacted like a real futon. It was actually really comfortable. Mount Lady looked way too curious, and she acted on it, sitting up on the second. Whoa! She exclaimed with wonder. That was my first reaction. He smiled. I'm pretty sure that this would be very useful for a rescue mission. And it was. He had used it a lot of time to rescue people. It was a veritable advantage. I bet. She snorted in reply. What else can it do? Man, your quirk is awesome. Who could have known? True, it took a lot of time to discover those new affinities in the past. Well, in the future, or in the real world, coma was not a high possibility at this point, but it was still a possibility. Well, it is useful for a lot of situations, I guess. I've always thought that my quirk was lame. I wouldn't have thought that if I had discovered this earlier. He chuckled, amused. Well, better late than never. That's all you can do with those. Yeah, that's all I can do with the forms I have affinity with. All in all, the swords and the a little of the ropes as well. To sum it up, I can control their height, weight and their capacity, smooth, sticky, comfy or heavy, and that's all. Unfortunately, once they stick to something, I can't transform their capacity anymore. Still a lot though. So do you have a good affinity with another form? You did say that the more affinity you have with the form, the easier it is for you to use. You have the best affinity with sharp things, especially swords, right? And round things, or well, your spheres. Mineta hummed as he was thinking. Well, my first affinities are sharp and round forms. And well, I guess I have a very good affinity with ropes and wires. It's not easy to control. It doesn't come as naturally to control as shaping swords in S though. It's not that strong either. I need more time to use it, but it doesn't really tax me. My quirk reminds me of a classmate's quirk, but a lot less powerful. She can create anything with a lipid of her body, and she can use that thing for real. He nodded. He stood up and motioned Mount Lady to do the same. He frowned in concentration, and with a bit more time, he transformed the two giants slowly. Two long ropes formed and wrapped themselves around his arms like snakes. Wait, you can control them at a distance? Suddenly stopped the young woman. He didn't immediately answer, but instead, reverted the two ropes back onto their original forms. Hairs. It depends on the form and the distance. I can't do that with those. He replied as he was tossing his GS up and down his hands, which was a shame, as it was the only form he used as much as the swords, but I can control the sharp forms as long as they are not too far. How far? She asked eagerly. Mineta exhaled. It was a little bit suspicious to know everything about his new ability. He only had the weekend to experiment, so, even though Mount Lady was too excited and hyped to learn more about his quirk as for now, she would certainly catch up to that soon later. At least, if he didn't play his cards well. I don't know, I've only had the weekend to experiment, and even so I wasn't exactly in a good shape. I didn't want to experiment with the sharp things too much, only with the S. He finally said blankly. Mount Lady blinked, then pouted. How about we experiment now? I'm here so you can do so without any problems. Mineta just sighed. We could, but we still have someone to greet. How about we do that with him, in a real spar? It would be a good training for me. He suggested with a shrug. Mount Lady looked thoughtful. I guess you are right. He should be here soon. As if on cue, a knock was heard on the door. Mount Lady quickly moved to open it. A lady that he recognized as one of Mount Lady's employees bowed politely. Your guest is here, miss, she informed them, while a tall and well-built, black-haired man appeared behind her. Kotsu, the heroine exclaimed happily. Then she nodded at the staff with a smile. Thanks, you can return to your work. The one addressed did as told with one last bow. Yo, it's been a while. The man smirked at Mount Lady. Yeah, I'm happy you made it. I know you are busy with your dojo. Ha! Well, you said that I'd meet someone interesting, so here I am. Mineta listened to their casual talk with interest. Kotsu Mikai, a dojo instructor. He remembered him since the man joined the war alongside the heroes when the fights had started to get strong. He was pretty strong. It had been a wonder why the man wasn't a hero in the first place, but since he hadn't been that close to Kotsu, he couldn't have asked such a thing. Though, it was weird that they hadn't interacted much. Both of them were swordsmen after all, and there hadn't been many swordsmen left in the war. He didn't know that Kotsu and Mount Lady knew each other, but then again, how could he have known? He barely interacted with the former before his death, and the latter died even more earlier in the war. He was snapped out of his thoughts when Kotsu's deep voice addressed him. So you are the interesting intern of you, huh? The older man inquired, his arms crossed. It was a surprising coincidence that he knew the person that Mount Lady had called to help him. Yes, sir. My name is Mineta Minoru, pleased to make your acquaintance. He bowed. Kotsu whistled. You are as polite as she told me you were. Anyway, my name is Kotsu Mikai, nice to meet you as well. He smiled. You watched Mineta and Kotsu's interaction with a twinkle in her eyes. She knew that Mineta had managed to grab the attention of the latter. That was a good thing. Suo, how about we start? She got in between them cheerfully, and they both looked at her. Start what? Kotsu asked. You want us to train? Mineta raised an eyebrow. She nodded. She really wanted to see the potential of Mineta's quirk in action. Kotsu frowned his forehead. Well, I'm here for that, I guess. He turned to Mineta. But listen well, kid, I may not be a hero, but I am a busy man. If you don't show me what you've got, or if what you've got isn't enough, then I ain't gonna train you. I'm here because you asked me to, but I'm not staying even if she tells me to if it's just to waste my time. His harsh words and even harsher tone didn't seem to faze Mineta. Mount Lady wasn't surprised. The little guy had a very good composure, from what she could have observed from their short time together. She could tell that Kotsu was impressed even if his face stayed impassive. She had known him long enough to read him well. He had been her former hand-to-hand instructor from her younger years. Though he was older than her by almost a decade, they acted more like friends than ex-student and mentor. Understood, sir. Mineta replied calmly. Great, now we can start. Show me your best, kid. A huge smile formed on her lips. She moved to the corner and got comfortable. This was going to be interesting. Kotsu had to hand credit where credit was due. The kid that you picked up had a good composure. He knew that even some pro-heroes would and had flinched under his strong glare and harsh words. Yet, Mineta didn't even twitch. That was interesting. The kid didn't look like much. If anything, he was just a dwarf. And yet, he held himself with calm and confidence well. Kotsu would soon find out if the boy was worth his time. He threw a wooden sword that he picked up from his bag at Mineta. The boy catched it with ease. Let's do this. No quirk, you don't use yours, I don't use mine. Do whatever you want, run, punch, kick, bite. Your one and only goal, impress me. He picked his own sword and got into position. Mineta imitated him quickly. His stance was good, so was the way he held his sword. I have to say, I wouldn't have given you that sword if you didn't inform me of your quirk earlier. My original plan was to test you in hand-to-hand. But first, do you even want to wield a sword? We can go back to just a simple fight. He had to hand it to Mineta. Despite his attempt at small talk, he didn't let his guard down. No, I want to wield a sword, he replied firmly before smirking. Besides, it would make me look cool. Kotsu's sweat dropped, before frowning at Mineta. Wielding a sword is dangerous, kid. You can easily kill with it. You can hurt others as much as you can hurt yourself. He warned. I know, I've been thinking about that. But I'll take responsibility. Working as a hero is dangerous, and with the situation with the League of Villainy have to get stronger. Kotsu looked at the shorter male with surprise. The boy was surprisingly mature, despite his earlier words. All right, give it your all then. Immediately after saying that did he attack. He catched the slight widening of Mineta's eyes before he blocked Kotsu in time, and tumbled a little before moving back fastly. Kotsu didn't let him though. He striked aggressively with a handful of moves. The kid was blocking almost every assault, with a lot of difficulty, but still, that was very impressive. Mineta had some very good reflexes. If not blocking, then he was dodging. His dodging skill was a lot better than his blocking one, for sure. Kotsu smirked, before backing away, letting Mineta breathe a little. Now, he was curious. Have you ever used a sword before? Well, I did some training in kendo when I was younger. Ah, that explains some things. No real debutant could block and dodge like that. Mineta knew that Kotsu could beat him up within a minute if he wanted to, but that wouldn't serve any of them. He needed to attack, he needed to move. These past few days, he had analyzed his body, and trained with it to test his moves. He had to move differently because of his short stature. A mistake, and he would hurt himself. But he was getting the hang of it. He took a deep breath, gripped his sword firmly, and ran towards Kotsu. Before the older man could block him, he retreated suddenly, and twisted his body differently, attacking from his other side. It was a simple feint, but he knew that if used right, then it could catch anyone off guard, especially if one underestimated its user. He smiled a little when Kotsu blocked it with a little bit more difficulty, and surprise written all over his face. Mineta backed away and jumped, striking his sword from above. Kotsu dodged by stepping back, and attacked again. He was taking advantage of Mineta's still crouched position. Mineta flexibly slumped on his back, dodging the attack, before using his hand to support himself on the ground, and with some acrobatic moves, he kicked Kotsu on his chin. His opponent stepped back, holding his sore face and smirking. Ah, you are good. I didn't expect that. Let's take you more seriously, then. Ah, he was going to get serious. So Mineta would have to be even more concentrated. They continued their battle for the next 30 minutes or so. At some point, Kotsu had kicked him strong in the face, leaving a very heavy bruise, the worst, but not the only bruise of the day, for sure. Mineta would be sore for the rest of the week, and not just in the face, had managed to block and dodge many of the older's attacks, but he took even more hits than he blocked and dodged. Though, he had been able to tone those down so they wouldn't be too painful. He did hit Kotsu a number of times too. Not that many times, but considering both of their skills and the huge gap between them, then it was nothing short of satisfying enough. It was mostly because he was using many feints and strategy that he succeeded in landing some hits on the dojo instructor, but his skill wasn't that bad either, thanks to his recent training. As he was sitting up and drinking a bottle of water, Mount Lady came trotting to them, beaming. Kotsu exchanged an amused look with her before crouching in front of him. "Heh, you are very good, Mineta. You did hit me a few times. I'm gonna be sore for the rest of the day," he commented, amused. Mineta glared playfully at him while massaging his bruised face. "And I'm gonna be sore for the rest of the week. You don't have the right to complain, sir." Kotsu let out a belly laugh and Mount Lady chuckled. "Are you mad at me, kid? It was an assessment. Besides, you did very well. Who could have thought that a short dwarf like you could hit so strong?" The oldest of the three snorted. Ah, I would thank you for the compliment if it wasn't for the fact that you dragged this assessment for too long. Uo, are you sulking, Mineta-chan? The lone woman in the room teased. Mineta sighed and pursed his lips. What? Can't take a beating? Kotosu smirked. You didn't have to go that strong on me, Kotsu-san. Well, be happy, kid. I'm going to teach you for the rest of the week. Don't expect this to be your last beating. Mineta snorted. They continued their banter for the next minutes or so, before the heroine interrupted their bickering. Now, I want you to fight again, but with both your quirks. Mount Lady exclaimed, grabbing the attention of the two of them. Sure, that would help him with developing his quirk. Mineta nodded before humming. Wouldn't it be illegal to use it when you are not a hero, Kotsu-san? Of course he knew the answer to his question, but he needed to be as normal and not suspicious as possible. Huh? No, it's not, especially when you are in the presence of a hero who can give you the okay, depending on the situation. And I have a special license anyway. Explained the man's special license. Yeah, you can apply for a special license depending on your work. Some doctors have it, since their quirks are medical-based. They aren't heroes, but they can use their quirk for their work. Mount Lady replied with a smile. Well, he knew that from the future, but not in the past. So now, if he ever recalled those knowledge, then he would have a source, a realistic and proven source, not a future excuse source. How did you know that? Because I'm from the future. So, still up for training? I don't like complaining brats, so you better shut up any protest. Kotsu smirked evilly. It was almost the same sadistic smile that Mount Lady used when she was talking about training. Mineta sighed and rolled his eyes. Let's train then. I'll take any training that I can. Anyway, so let's just continue. Good, we'll let you take some rest first, then we will proceed. After resting for a moment, they took place in the center of the room while Mount Lady moved to the side once again. Since I do know how your quirk works, I'll give you some information about mine. I'm a telekinesis. My quirk is called telekinesis, which means that I can move anything with my will and my mind. Talk about a powerful quirk. No wonder he had been so great on the battlefield in the future. The wooden sword on the ground moved on its own to reach Kotsu's hand in a second. Wow, that quirk of him was great, especially for combat and rescue missions. The older man would have made a fine hero had he been one. But not everyone liked to be a hero or wanted to be one. The job was dangerous, and if kids liked to dream of being one, then adults knew the reality of it better. Neat. He commented with a whistle, right? It's a pretty cool quirk, if I say so myself. Let's start then. Use all your tricks because I'm not going to go easy on you. Don't try to pull off something dangerous though. Be careful with your hands. He catched the implication behind the words. So I can use my quirk, then? The swords. You've proven that you know how to handle one. But be careful. And you are going to use a wooden sword? When I use swords as sharp as a real one? Nah, of course not. I think you can handle some cuts here and there, and you can come back to that nurse in your school if anything. Well, now he knew that he had to be even more careful. The wooden sword in Kotsu's hand moved again and took place on the side. A second later, a real sword was in its stead, having displaced from the older male's bag. Really neat. Mineta thought as he was taking two of his S and shaping them as sharp swords. Kotsu raised a brow. Using two swords now? I've always been more balanced and better with two swords. And how would you know that? His opponent's voice was slightly septic. Because I've taken interest in cool swords when I was little. I did kendo and I tried the two-sword style. Since I'm very short, I use that style better. That's what my teachers back then told me too. He answered calmly. What he said was true. Everything he said was true. It was an escape from his problems back then. He hadn't picked up a sword anymore until he got into college. Honestly, he forgot all he learned about swords and remastered it again with real-life practice. So this young Mineta didn't have any reflexes anymore when it came to swords, but he could use his intelligence as an excuse as to why he knew the things he knew about those fighting styles when he hadn't done that in years. All right then, it's very impressive that you still use the sword as well as you do now. You are out of practice, aren't you? Yeah, I haven't used a sword in years, until a few days ago. That's how I stabbed my shoulder. I was too out of practice and slightly out of it. He snickered. Kotsu laughed. You told me about that. You are an idiot. The older man mocked. Buo, hewed Mount Lady from the side. The swordsman turned to her, stop talking and go at it. Already? Both of them rolled their eyes and faced each other, readying themselves. Our public is waiting. I guess we'll have to start. Give your everything, kiddo. After saying that, Kotsu moved, his sword in hand, swng at him. Mineta blocked with his right sword. Kotsu continued again with a smirk. Mineta was thrown meters away by an invisible force. He widened his eyes and the second after, the dojo instructor was before him, sword ready to cut him down like a vegetable as he was still in the air. Mineta's left sword transformed into a huge bouncing that recoiled Kotsu back. This time, it was the older one who looked surprised. He heard Mount Lady squeal, but didn't have the time to dwell on that since Kotsu was back at SWNGNG again. The huge was back on his hand as a sword again the second after. He blocked and dodged, blocked, dodged, and swung. Blocking, dodging, attacking. He felt a slight cut on his left cheek the few seconds after they had clashed their swords. Mineta transformed his left sword and threw it at Kotsu, who attempted to block, but was forced to dodge as this suddenly grew bigger. Mineta used the opportunity to back away. He wiped the BLD off his cheek with a frown. He dodged, caught off guard as the was going back at him at full force. Telekinesis, man, what a quirk. The transformed into a sword and stopped behind him. He took 2 other on his hand and threw them in the air. 2 large knives flew at Kotsu, knives that he blocked and redirected at Mineta. The knives were back as small as the second after. But Kotsu didn't let him have his rest as he was thrown in the air and flying dangerously towards the wall. DMN, he took one of his hairs again and transformed it into a huge sticky that caught him before his crash. He was on his feet and stayed where it was. Kotsu flew at him again, and they were back at fighting with swords while occasionally using their quirk to catch their opponent off guard. Mineta was thrown around once again, but he used his swords and quirk to block whatever attacks that Kotsu used. Though now, he had multiple cuts on his body, but so did the dojo instructor. He had used his quirk to throw many sticky hairs as he usually did while fighting. Kotsu had some sticking on his clothes since he couldn't dodge or block everything, even with his power. He couldn't transform sticky S into big S or swords anymore when they were attached to something, and his giant sticky GS could only stuck when connected on non-living things, which Kotsu understood. Since he didn't try to get rid of them, he wouldn't have been able to anyway, but he could use something else, even if it took a little bit more energy and concentration. As they were clashing their swords, and he was being thrown around, Mineta didn't know how he managed to block in the air with the only power of his mind because his body was still weak as heck. The purple-haired boy thanked his brain for coming up with so much defensive and offensive tactic and action, because Kotsu was DMN powerful, and if it wasn't for his cunning moves, then Mineta would be a bloody mess by now. Kotsu suddenly stopped all his attacks, letting Mineta back away from him. Let's try something. You'll have to knock me out, or you'll be the one who'd be knocked out. The shorter boy blinked, and the older one crossed his arm with a smirk. Mineta didn't have the time to say anything as he was suddenly flying. No, not just flying. He was turning around in the air, turning around fast. Wait, he was trying to. His guess seemed to be right as the pace quickened. FCK, he is trying to knock me out with a roller coaster. Mineta felt dizzy. Man, he wanted to throw up. He needed to get out of this. He knew that Kotsu was testing him. From what he had observed, the man's quirk wasn't without its own weakness. Kotsu needed time after using it. If he used his telekinesis on light things, then he could practically use it a short time after. Same goes for the timing. If he used it for not too long, then he could use it again shortly after. But if the thing was heavy, or if he used his quirk for too long, then he would need a longer break as well. Mineta was sure that Kotsu had calculated it. The amount of time he would have before being forced to stop was longer than the amount of time Mineta would have before fainting with his dizziness. FCK, he wanted to throw up. Kotsu was testing his survival intellect. What would he do in this kind of situation? That was what the dojo instructor wanted to know. Sit, was the old man even just a simple dojo instructor? What kind of simple dojo instructor would think of something like this? Mineta had a plan. Either he knocked Kotsu out, or he would end up throwing up and fainting. He knew what to do, but it was strong as FCK. He concentrated. He tried to. It was strong, but after some time, he managed to do it. He visualized the S around them. He needed the timing to be quick and right. He was still in the air, spinning around like a tornado. He catched a glimpse at his hair spheres and kept his eyes on them. As he was trying not to throw up, Mineta grimaced. Then he felt it. Great! His energy was ready. Now he just had to wait a little longer. He finally found all the S necessary for his next move, difficult as hell. But he still managed it. It was time to act. Yu was watching the action from the sidelines. It was an amazing fight. Mineta's quirk was just so convenient. Despite the large gap in power, Mineta was standing up to Kotsu with ingenuity, even though the latter wasn't going easy on him at all. If they were in a more open space, then she was sure that this fight would be extremely destructive because the younger boy could use his S with more freedom and Kotsu would have more options with his quirk as well. Now, she couldn't doubt it. Mineta was going to be an amazing hero. Though right now, it looked like he was going to faint soon. She wondered if Mineta could get out if Thish wasn't strong enough physically, and she wasn't sure that he had a plan. She was proven wrong as the S around both of them suddenly transformed into ropes. The dojo instructor didn't have the time to do anything but widen his eyes as the purple snake squeezed one of his pressure points on the shoulder, and the second after, Kotsu's eyes rolled, and he collapsed, knocked out. Mount Lady was openly gaping at the scene, her eyes wide with shock. Mineta collapsed on the floor as well, one hand on his head and the other on his stomach, the swords he had before reversing back to their original forms. That was one hell of a fight, considering that the older was supposed to be a simple dojo instructor, and the younger was a simple student hero in training. But well, she called up 2 of her sidekicks to help her move them. "What the heck happened here?" asked one of them as he looked around, then at the 2 lying opponents, stunned. "Those purple S around are the kids' quirk, right? Man, there are so many," exclaimed the other one with surprise. "Let's just move them upstairs," she sighed. She moved to take a look at Mineta, and was surprised to see that he was still conscient, though he looked ill and was grimacing, his eyes shut. She took place on the middle couch, observing Kotsu and Mineta. The former refused to move or talk. She had called up a medic to check on them just in case. The doctor had informed her that they were both all right after bandaging their wounds and taking a closer look at Mineta. The boy was okay, but he was dizzy and completely out of it. Although, he was still conscient. You heard a groan and looked up from the book she had in hand. It seemed like Kotsu was finally waking up. "What the FCK happened?" he asked, massaging his shoulder, his pressure point. "Mineta managed to knock you out," she replied, amused. She saw him sitting up and glancing at her with curiosity. "Seriously? How?" He paused, blinked, then laughed loudly. "The brat has a tricky brain. I didn't expect him to pull that." "The brat is still awake. So you lost though." He looked sick with dizziness. "He is still trying to rest." She chuckled. "Really? See for yourself." She pointed out the opposite large couch where the shorter boy was lying, still clenching his stomach. Kotsu stood up and made his way towards the younger male. He crouched in front of the futon. "You awake, kid?" "Shut up," came the muffled, rude reply. She could see the surprised look on her friend's face, and she herself was slightly skeptic because Mineta had never been openly rude, but she guessed that with the way he felt now, it was kind of normal. "Huh, you look sick." "And whose fault is that?" They observed Mineta opening one of his eyes and glaring at Kotsu. "Aw, come on, kid, I'm just a dojo instructor who tried to train you." The oldest snorted. The youngest sat up slowly and gave the dojo instructor a death glare. "What kind of FC King dojo instructor comes up with that city FC King method? Now I feel like Sid and DMN if I'd feel better soon," he complained. The adults exchanged a stunned glance, and Mount Lady broke the silence that followed. "Didn't know that you could swear like that, Mineta-chan. That's surprising." "Yeah, I know some pretty bad words, and I wouldn't have used them here if it wasn't for that FC King stunt earlier." "Ma, calm down, kid, it was just training. You knocked me out as well, you know." "Excuse me, you aren't the one who feels like Sit right now," replied Mineta with a heavy sigh. "What kind of teacher even are you? What you pulled back there wasn't something a normal dojo instructor would." Kotsu chuckled. "Right, well, I had some training too. In fact, I was a hero student too, but I decided not to become one in the end. I joined the special force in the Japanese army instead. That's the kind of training that makes you stronger." Mineta groaned with a grimace. "That's the kind of training that makes you feel sick." He sighed out, pulling a laugh out of the 2 others. "We can do whatever you want us to do. I just need to improve. But I won't move out of this couch for any physical activities until tomorrow. Still, you could have just ended the fight without making me jelly." "Don't worry, Mineta-chan, you can rest as much as you want until tomorrow," smiled Mont Lady. "And don't worry, you'll see hell with my training. I won't let you catch me off guard anymore, and you'll learn many things." Kotsu smirked easily. Mineta shrugged and went back to his nap after nodding at them. She was curious to see his future progress with the new development of his quirk. Next day, Mineta completed his usual courses despite his soreness. He jogged first thing in the morning, then completed his cleaning duty while helping some of the staff with their work. He was complaining internally, not about his chores or anything but about his own weakness and Kotsu's rough treatment from the day before. He had never been as strong with training the newbies during the war. Tormenting them was something that Hawks enjoyed more. After patrolling with Mount Lady and watching her stop criminals here and there, he was back on the training room's ground. Mineta and Kotsu were facing each other once again. "So, you are good. But, you lack strength and endurance. While you made up with them with wit and strategy, that won't always be enough," started his new mentor. He knew that though, that's why he had been training as he had done those last few days. "I've also noticed that you are awkward with everything, be it fighting or swords. You lack DSPLN, your body isn't as fast as your mind." He couldn't have worded it better, so he nodded. "I agree." "Good. We will work on that. 1 week won't be enough, obviously. But we will do our best during the time we have. Today, instead of sparring, I will supervise your training. I will correct every wrong stance. Though you are good with swords, your body seems to be a step behind. Mineta agreed with the proposition. He needed someone to beat down the basics in his body. He couldn't exactly learn them with real-life experience like before, because even though he knew what he was doing wrong, correcting them was a whole lot stronger alone. As he was doing the basic stance he knew, Kotsu was correcting his position harshly, making him repeat every one of them while beating him down. That was exactly what he needed. He needed someone to forcefully correct them and force his body to get used to it. Force his body to have some reflex. Force it to be sharper and less awkward. They did that for the next few hours, sometimes taking a few minutes break. Mount Lady also gave some tips here and there, until they changed the strategy once again. All right, let's spar again. 15 minutes without quirks, and 15 minutes with. After that, we will call it a day. We will do that as a routine from now on until the end of the week. Like that, you will improve steadily. Mineta nodded without complaining. He really needed to train strong. They sparred, Mount Lady observing from the sides. The large gap was there, but he was learning to do better, and that was the most important thing. Kotsu honestly liked Mineta a lot. He was fun to be around, sarcastic, witty, and unpredictable. Even if they bickered often, the kid was strong working, and he never complained as long as Kotsu didn't do something too unreasonable. He also had the personality for the hero job. He didn't exactly show it, but the younger boy cared a lot. He had seen him helping every of you's staff without anyone asking him to. There was that day when Kotsu came to the training room, in a very sour mood. Mount Lady had not been there, she was in some meetings, so Mineta and him were left alone. He hadn't even been aware that he had broken their routine as he had asked the kid to spar immediately after arriving. Mineta had only taken a look at him and agreed without a word. He had only realized that he had been too out of control emotionally and had gone too far when he had beaten Mineta up, and pushed him so strong that he collapsed. When Mineta woke up, Kotsu could only look at him with guilt as he apologized. The boy rolled his eyes at him, then smiled. Feel better? He had asked, and it wasn't even a taunt, it was a genuine question. The dojo instructor could only gape at him as he explained himself. I knew you were sad and angry. It was pretty obvious. What bothers you has bothered you for days now. I noticed it when we first met. It was only a matter of time until you snapped. Sometimes, you just need to burn the stress. I didn't protest against the spar, so don't feel too guilty. I hope it helped you a little. He hadn't been able to say anything else to the boy, and the day after, they just got back to their usual routine. They never talked about it. Until now, you had gone to take an important call as Kotsu and Mineta were sitting down after a session of basic swords. The younger boy was drinking water as the older one decided that it was the best time to talk, since the heroine wasn't here. Do you know why I was so upset that day? He started quietly. Mineta snorted and put his bottle down to look at him. No, Kotsu-san, I don't. Last time I checked, I didn't have a mind-reading quirk. I just knew you were upset. You don't have to tell me anything. You already apologized, and that was enough. He had to laugh a little at the first statement. Then he sighed. I think I owe you an explanation. Well, my dojo is facing some problems right now. I won't tell you what kind, but it's affecting a lot of my students. I've had a very nasty argument with one of them that day. He was angry, so was I. I tried not to lose my cool, but I've been under pressure for months now, so I snapped. I told him things I didn't want to. I guess he hurted his feelings. We are trying to mend things, no, but the damage is done. I was so pissed I took it out on you. I'm still sorry for that. Mineta had listened to him quietly before shaking his head. It's all right. Honestly, I knew it was coming, so I just let you beat it out of yourself. I'm no one and I'm younger than you, so it's not really my place to say, but I'll advise you not to bottle things up next time. When you feel like get it out when you are alone or talk to someone, whatever you can to get it out or you'll snap. We all have our breaking points, but it's important to take care of it healthily, or you'll just end up hurting yourself and others. Mineta hummed. Kotsu blinked. Wow, the kid had some wise words. Heh, you are wiser than you look. He smirked, as the younger one rolled his eyes. Thanks anyway, I guess I just needed that out of my system. The shorter male nodded with a smile. So, did you apologize to your student, and did he apologize to you? He raised a brow. I'm the one responsible, I'm his teacher. So I was the one in the wrong. He apologized, but why would he need to? I won't pretend like I know what you argued about. An argument is never one-sided. Sure, you are his teacher and all, but he has some responsibility as well. Whatever he said made you snap. You were wrong to snap, but he wasn't without fault. Really wise words for one so young. You are right. I already knew that, but I think I needed someone to tell me. I'll try to teach him that lesson once he cools down. You are really something, kid. Too mature for your age, he remarked as Mineta shrugged. Thank you for the advice and for listening, kid. It helped a lot. Don't mention it. And like that, they grew closer. Kotsu hadn't realized just how much he had gotten attached until the end of their last day of training, which was amazing as he wasn't one to get attached easily. They have known each other for a few days only, but the kid had something in him that made people want to follow him. Mineta Machayan, you whined while hugging the boy, as he tried to get out of the hold. Mount Latason, would you please let me go? Nuo, it's your last day with us. How would I survive without your cleaning expertise? Mineta sighed. You did well without me before, you'll survive. He just got hugged tighter after that. Nuo, you do know that I'm a pervert, and you are a appealing girl, right? So it would be wiser if you let go of me. He threatened as he struggled out of her arms. You laughed and Kotsu snorted. I know that you won't do anything. How? Mineta narrowed his eyes. I just know. You are just too respectful, kid. We all know you won't. The youngest huffed and sighed with a defeated expression on his face. You wouldn't say that if you'd met me earlier, he mumbled. I would have been more careful with you if you acted like your files, but you don't, so let us hoog. And you are trying to get out of her arms. What kind of pervert doesn't take advantage of that? The respectful kind, Mineta snapped with an offended scowl. Didn't know that that kind of pervert existed. Kotsu replied with a small smirk. It does. I'm one. Are you trying to doubt my perversity? The shorter male recoiled. Yes. I am a pervert. You are not acting like it. You watched their bickering with an amused smile. And I'm telling you I am. Prove it. What do you want me to do? Mineta asked, frustrated. Do something a pervert would do in this situation. What? If you were really a pervert, you would know. I'm a pervert. I don't need to prove anything. I just respect Mount Latason. The heroine cooed. Awa, you respect me. She hugged him again. The younger boy pinched his nose. See? I am a pervert. I can make a very obscene comment out of this simple hug. But I choose not to because girls and women in general are scary when pushed. I learned that the strong way. Mineta rolled his eyes. And Kotsu smiled slightly fondly. Right. I'll miss you, kid. You are a good company. You improved so fast. You are a natural-born swordsman. Thanks, the small boy replied with a smile. But I don't think natural-born swordsmen exist. Kotsu's sweat dropped and you snickered. You are one. You learned the basics really fast. Even if you knew them when you were younger, it's still very impressive how much you've improved. If you keep this up, you'll maybe surpass me own day. The brat had the gut to laugh. I'm touched by the compliment. I'll miss you both too. I'll try to keep in touch. How about you drop by my dojo once a week? If you have something else to do, you can call me up to conceal a session, but it would be good to see you often. See? He really got attached. He wouldn't propose that to just anyone. Mineta could only blink when he heard the proposition. So, we'll keep sparring or something? He asked with a raised brow. Why not? You can spar with some of my students as well. It's not for free, is it? He snorted. Well, I propose so you won't need to pay. You only need to bring food for me and my students, Kotsu smirked. The old man was trying to aug him. He would run dry with paying that. Are you trying to make me broke or something? Paying for food for all of you would accomplish that. The dojo instructor just laughed and waved his hands in the air. You can just bring snacks. Anyway, I want you to meet my students, and you won't always train once we are there. I won't make you pay for a barely 30-minute spar every month or two. All right, I'll do that if you want. Mineta relented with a sigh. And you can come back for your work studies. Mount Lady immediately proposed. Mineta blinked in surprise. He didn't expect her to invite him like that. Well, it seemed like he changed things a little bit more than he had planned to. He wasn't stupid. He knew that his actions would have changed some events, but he didn't really think that it would be to this extent. Maybe he did go overboard, work studies? He asked, trying to sound as confused as he could. It's like this internship but longer, and instead of standing around while I do my work, you'll be considered a sidekick. Oh, he nodded in understanding, even though he already knew all that. I want you to come back here. Well, sure, it would save me the trouble of searching. MT Lady squealed and hugged him once again. Dia minute, couldn't she keep her hands to herself? She was a beauty, yes, and he was a pervert, but he still valued his personal space. The war had made him a paranoid BSTRD. It's not like he didn't like her hugs, they were great. He just couldn't let someone hug him so suddenly. It was against his wear instinct. He was released from the aggressive hugs a minute later. Kamui would kill him if he knew this, or well, he would at least glare at him. One last thing. When we are the three of us or the two of us, just call me you. She smiled. Well, that would be difficult. He had been used to calling her Mount Lady those past few days. Nevertheless, he agreed, just so she won't nag him. Here is the dojo's address. Kid, I'll call you to confirm next week. We can also go and register your new quirk's affinity for an update. Kotsu grinned, handing him a small card. The younger one blinked. He had almost forgotten that that was a requirement. I have to go now though. Still have some work to do. Congratulations on surviving my training. Goodbye you, Mineta. Hope to see you soon. Mineta rolled his eyes and bid him goodbye, as did the pro hero. He turned towards the female once Kotsu was gone. I'll go as well, Mount Lad Yusen. My stay here was great. We will see each other again at my work studies, then. Mount Lady sniffed dramatically. Before you go, the staff and everyone wanted to say goodbye. Let's go see them. She dragged him out of the training room to the common study room of the employees, where everyone was already gathered. I hope you had a nice stay, Mineta-kun. One of them, that he recognized as the receptionist lady, stated. Yeah, thanks for the help. It was great to have you here. We hope to see you again soon. We will miss you, kid. The warm goodbyes and thanks surprised Mineta. He didn't quite expect it. They even threw him a small party that warmed up his scent. At the end, Mount Lady kneeled in front of him. You improved a lot during your stay here. You've changed, so keep up the good work. You will make a fine hero one day. She then hugged him, but it was a different kind of hug, different from her usual ones. This one was so gentle he just tensed. Thanks, he whispered against the embrace, saying that he was quite overwhelmed by the party, and all the genuine goodbyes was not an exaggeration. It had been so long since he had last been at a party, and had felt so much warmth. He didn't think that he would ever feel this way again. When he got home, he just numbly lied on his bed and stared at the ceiling. This dream, or reality whatever this was toying with him cruelly. Either he woke up to his war-torn future, or he was left here with the burden of his knowledge giving him such warmth was nothing but cruel, because he couldn't receive it, not as much as he wanted. Anyway, he smiled bitterly at the thought. Either he woke up to deal with 3 new deaths and be back at his burdening, tiring position, fighting in a violent bloody war, or he was stuck here. He was realistic enough to know that he was probably here alone, which made him the only person to have lived through the biggest war in world history, and the only person to have the means of changing that. So yeah, either choice, if he had any at all, would end up with him unhappy and tired. Maybe the universe was getting back at him for being such a pervert when he was young, or maybe he had committed some sort of sin in his past life. But he was starting to feel like he would never feel happy again. He had felt warm earlier, but that had pained him more than it had helped him. Wow, he was more messed up than he thought. War didn't let you deal with your mental health, especially not when you are one called Mineta Minoru, who was not only the commander of the Front War of Asia, but who was also a famous pro-hero. 2 titles that only he had possessed at the same time. 2 titles that he had sometimes hated more than anything else. Being back in time wasn't better. He was left with so much free time that he just had to deal with his mental health, with his bitter thoughts and pained feelings. He wasn't delusional or optimistic enough to think that he didn't retain some kind of trauma or sequels from the war. War wasn't kind to anyone, certainly not to him. It may have seemed like he was totally okay, but that was just because he had run himself ragged with his responsibilities, because he had blocked every negative and illogical feeling in the most unhealthy way possible. Though, he did try to get it out of his system sometimes in the future, but he barely ever had the time to. Mineta sighed and shook his head. He didn't want to deal with this, nor did he have the time to. He had to prepare himself for his inevitable encounter with his former classmates and his former homeroom teacher. He grimaced and decided to meditate, to just get rid of all of these stupid thoughts. Wanted to smoke, but since he was technically underage then he had to abstain. He CLCK'd his tongue. FCK, life wasn't kind. When the next Monday came, Mineta could only massage his head. He reluctantly put his uniforms on as he grimaced. He looked at the mirror and had to sigh. He looked like there was no kinder way to say it. He had bags under his eyes and his sharp, but dull eyes weren't pretty on a kid's face. He knew that his classmates would be suspicious, and God forbid Midoriya to get involved. With his stupid kind soul, he would just search for a way to make Mineta feel better, and that would only be a waste. He held his bag on his shoulder, and had one last look at the mirror, before stepping out of his lonely house once again. He blankly made his way to UA. Unlike last time, this trip left him more anxious, because this time, he wasn't going to visit Recovery Girl, and no matter how scary she could be, she would always be a better option than dealing with his messed up mind. He was going to see people that he wasn't quite sure he was ready to see yet. Mineta was standing dumbly in front of the door of his classroom, nostalgia hitting him like a rock. It was such a weird feeling. I haven't been here for a decade. He heard no noises inside, so he assumed that no one was there yet, or maybe there was someone but one of quiet ones. He was way earlier than he usually was when he had been a high schooler. He entered with hesitation, his heart painfully inside his cent. He was greeted with a deserted room, and despite that, he still felt overwhelmed. He huffed and took place in his desk, or well, where he remembered his desk being. He was pretty thankful that he had such a great memory, or else, he would be in a lot of trouble. Mineta tiredly rested his head against his table. He had strongly slept during the last week. It wasn't like he was insomniac or anything. Nightmares were never a problem once you get used to it. It was just that he had been so used to a 4 hours sleep on a basis that he couldn't get more, even if he wanted to. His mind was used to it, but his younger body was giving him a strong time. He stayed like that for the next few or not so few minutes, though he didn't know exactly how many. He had been forced to look up as he heard the door sliding open. Ida Tenya in all his young glory entered the classroom, and he could only stare. It was so strange to see him so lively and carefree and so young. It wasn't the future Ida neither, he knew it. Although, now that he thought about it, this baby Lita had always been early in high school. The baby Ida in question met his eyes and startled at his presence. Mineta-kun, blinked the taller though younger boy. Good morning, Ida. He greeted with a yawn. Good morning. You are quite earlier than usual, Mineta-kun, exclaimed the class rep with his loud, enthusiastic and straight voice. I didn't get much sleep, and had nothing better to do. So I just came early. He explained. There was also the fact that he didn't want to enter and see them. He much preferred the other way around. But Lita didn't need to know that. Oh. So, how are you doing? Heard of the incident and all, you okay? He asked, looking at the kid directly in the eyes. Ida tensed slightly, then sighed. I'm all right, just some injuries here and there. I was careless. He replied with a sad tone. Mineta shook his head and snorted. We all got careless. Sometimes. Don't think about it too much. Glad you were all right though. He smiled. Lita widened his eyes and looked at him with surprise. Thank you, Mineta-kun. Anyway, hope you learned something from your internship. I did, and he believed him. The encounter with Stain probably taught him a good lesson. And you, Mineta-kun? He hummed and looked at the ceiling, seeking his tongue. He didn't learn anything new, his younger body did, but his mind didn't. Well, he couldn't say that to anyone right now. I guess I did. He shrugged. Ida stayed silent for a moment, staring at him. What with everyone doing that, it made him uncomfortable. Are you all right, Mineta-kun? You look really tired. The younger male finally said. So that was what was on his mind, huh? Mineta honestly felt like CRP, and he knew that he didn't look much better. That probably worried Lita. He had never really been close to any of his ex-classmates beside Kaminari for that matter, but they were all still surprisingly welcoming of him. The girls were wary around him, which was normal, but they never left him out somehow. They really were good kids. They deserved to be heroes each and every one of them. The one who never really deserved it was the one who managed to survive the longest, and who got a title that he didn't merit. The irony. Mineta-kun? Yeah, Ida was still talking to him. He needed to stop spacing out in the middle of a conversation. Sorry. I'm okay. I just trained really strong last week, and I didn't get much sleep yesterday. Other than that, I'm all right. Thanks for asking. He smiled. Lita didn't look completely convinced, but he nodded anyway, and excused himself to check on his lessons. A really good and model student. Mineta got back to his resting position and closed his eyes. A while later, the peaceful silence broke once again as the door opened. He heard a voice greeting Lita. A voice that he recognized very well. Sit. He didn't want to look up. He didn't want to see him. But he needed to check maybe, just maybe. He also came back. He was the only one there with him when he snapped, the only one who could possibly be here as well. The symbol of hope, the non-official number one hero, the one who never gave up, the reckless to the point of being an almost arrogant hero. Midoriya Izuku. He heard a shuffling sound and steps that were getting closer. Mineta-kun, Midoriya said with hesitation. He sighed and opened his eyes to look up. He fought the urge to flinch at the young face in front of him. As he met the green-haired kid's eyes, couldn't help the bitter smile that appeared on his lips. Shining, full of life and vigor eyes, Midoriya didn't come back or wasn't on his dream. His mind whispered somberly, why did he even hope? Deku died, that was the sole reason he was here to begin with. The small slip on his expression shifted into a blank poker look. He didn't want anyone to see how he felt. Yo, Midoriya. He nodded. Good morning, Mineta-kun. Are you all right? He gave him his most transparent smile. Yep. Shouldn't I be the one to ask that, though? Are you all right? he inquired with a raised eyebrow. Midoriya blushed in embarrassment and smiled back at him. Yes, I'm okay. All three of us are okay, you don't need to worry. He wasn't worried, but let the kid believe whatever he wanted. He gave him a second nod. Glad for that. I'll go back to sleep if you don't mind. I didn't get much rest these days, so I'll take whatever time I have. He excused himself with a forced but somehow convincing smile. Midoriya blinked and looked surprised. All right, Mineta-kun, I'll leave you at that. The green-haired teen smiled back. Without adding anything else, Mineta got back on his resting position. He heard and felt many people arrive one by one. In a short little amount of time, the classroom was filled with noises that made him feel like really came back. Whatever this was going to be strong to deal with, but Mineta was used to pressure. He would just do his best and strive along with the flow like he always did. He sighed when he felt someone tug his arm, trying to get his attention. He needed a little bit more time to let everything sink on his mind. Unfortunately, he didn't have that, he never had it, and he was always forced to manage. Of course, being back in time wasn't going to change that. He lifted his head and met one of the yellowest glowing eyes he had ever seen. A tuft of blonde hair came to his view, and a very familiar face placed itself in front of him. FCK was the only thing that passed through his head. A pang of pain hit his heart as a swimming of hurtful memories shot his brain, memories that he had pushed away so far that he was sure it would never resurface. Yo, mate. Sorry for waking you up, but the class is gonna start soon, and I heard you were pretty tired. I was kinda worried, so I wanted to ask if you were okay. Kaminari Denki asked. His former and very dead best friend asked. Mineta exhaled a deep breath, and the panic, hurt and troubled feelings coming through him only reflected on his face for a half-second. He smiled at Denki. Hey, I'm okay, thanks for asking. He replied simply. He couldn't bring himself to say a name he hadn't dared to think about in years. He saw the taller teen frown and look at him with even more worry. He needed to get a grip, no matter how painful this was. He needed to act like everything was all right, as he always did. He was going to be strong, even if his younger body was stronger to control, and felt emotions stronger. He closed his eyes for a second. CLC cut his tongue and opened them, ready to do what he needed to do. Kaminar, stop looking at me like I'm gonna drop dead. He teased, rolling his eyes with a grin. I had a pretty strong time with Mount Lady. As much as she is a beauty, she was also pretty strict. The worry in his classmates' eyes dissipated a little. It left him with a sour taste in his mouth. That he could act so well, he deceived the person who was supposed to know him the best in the past, his grandpa excluded. But it was not really surprising since he could deceive almost anyone, especially when it concerned his own health. And Kaminari didn't know him that well anyway. Even if Kaminari had been his closest friend, he has never been Kaminari's closest friend. The illusion his younger counterpart had of being his best friend was just that, an illusion. Man, I guess you had it tough, no wonder you look like Sit. Denki smirked. Heh, thanks for the compliment, he said with a snort. Kaminari laughed. I'm happy you're okay, or well, better than you look at least. But I'd better go back to my seat now. The class is gonna start soon, and I don't want Aizawa-sensei to have my butt. The kid smiled. Mineta nodded as Denki left. Mineta felt the atmosphere of the room change when his former homeroom teacher entered. Everybody quieted down and were sitting obediently on their chairs, him included. A chill traveled down his spine as he suddenly recalled what happened before his time travel, before the fateful death of the symbol of hope, and what led him where Iri and Midoriya had been. Mineta Shiriken, Commander, if the West Front had been a trap like you predicted, but it was on a different scale. Everybody on our side had been erased. They are all breathe dead. They didn't have the time to retreat like. You ordered them to if when things go down. Wait, what? No. Does that mean? Mineta, does that mean that Aizawa-sensei? That can't be. It has to be wrong, even our strongest heroes. Everybody even your two advisors. Commander. All right, thank you for informing me. All right. Mineta, how can you be this calm? We don't have the time. Prepare yourselves. We are heading to the battles, and I'm going to the North Front. We will deal with this later. We have a symbol to save. Wait, Mineta, doesn't it affect you at all? Aizawa-sensei you can't be this. Calm down. Do you think I'm that heartless? DMN, it hurts like heck. But Sai, we have a duty to accomplish. You'll cry, scream, yell more when this is over, but now. We have to be strong, so everyone strong. Hold on a little longer because that is what needs to be done. Get yourselves together. Mineta Shiriken, Mineta. We will mourn him when the times come, but we still have a battle to win. He hadn't even had the time to process. He wasn't sure then, if he had even believed it. He was happy it didn't sink in, or he would have a stronger time looking at his teacher right now. He tried to focus during class. He really did, but he just couldn't. Day passed in a blur. He somehow recalled some of his classmates asking him if he was as alright as he said he was, especially in Denki's case. He was pretty sure that Aizawa even frowned at him, with an almost concerned look. He was too tired to dwell on anything much longer. When he got home, he just couldn't get rid of the fog inside his head. The pressure of the last few years was finally catching up to him. Or was it his body that couldn't catch up with his adult mind? He was exhausted, drained emotionally and mentally. But now that he saw his former classmates, Mineta was sure that he wouldn't have the same problems anymore. For the moment though, he got what he could throw out of his system. He couldn't talk with someone or complain about his worries and problems, so he applied for the other alternative. He trained like crazy. He had moved the furniture in the living room to widen the space. As he was fighting some invisible opponent with his swords, he suddenly heard his phone bip. He stopped and sighed, reversing his swords back. Who could call him at this hour? The screen of his beeping phone showed one single name, Grandpa. A cold bucket of water splashed his whole body as he froze. Sit, the old man was calling him. It looked like the day of confrontation hadn't ended yet. Hello, he picked up with hesitation, Mineta. His grandpa greeted with a calm but tender and gentle voice. FCK. Ah, hi Grandpa. Are you okay? You sound a little bit weary. Stupid old man who knew him better than anyone else. Stupid old man with his voice full of worry and love. Why did his grandpa ever love him? He was probably the only one who had ever accepted him with all his flaws, and who had been the proudest when he became a decent guy. Yeah, I'm okay. Remember the internship I talked about? He heard his interlocutor hum in agreement. I just finished it. I trained really strong, so I'm a bit tired. You trained really strong? Hey, don't sound so surprised. The older man chuckled. Sorry, it's just odd. Did you have a change of heart? You could say it like that. I decided to become a true hero. He replied honestly. A silence. Then, I'm proud of you, Mineta. FCK, FCK, FCK. His grandpa was playing with his head right now. Oh, I don't know what happened, but whatever is bothering you, you can always talk to me. All right, are you sure you are okay? Yeah, don't worry. Anyway, why did you call? I had some time, so I decided to call my favorite grandson. Mineta laughed brokenly. I'm your only grandson, old man. Which makes you my favorite. Right, he took a deep breath, troubled. How are you doing? I'm sorry I can call you only once every week. I would have liked it if we could talk more often. The businessman sighed. No, it's Aki and I'm fine. I hope you are okay too. I am. Mineta inhaled deeply, then exhaled slowly. I'll go now though, if you don't mind. I'm really tired and I was kind of napping when you called so. He lied easily. Oh, all right Mineta, rest well and take care of yourself. Eat properly. I'll call you some other times. He could hear the smile in his interlocutor's voice. Okay, bye Grandpa. Take care. He hung up the second after. Mineta brushed his face with his hand and closed his eyes, sat up on the ground and stayed there for a moment. His troubled feelings suddenly vanished and a whole set of anger took place in its stead. His tender, loving and gentle grandpa, his dead grandpa, his dear grandpa, who had been killed by none other than F-seeking all for one. His seething mind clouded everything around him. All for one, the one responsible for F-seeking everything. The one he had swore to stop at all cost to kill. He had loathed, no hated the man, the monster with all his heart. He still did. The BSTRD had been the reason for all those deaths. And even if he knew that he couldn't go for revenge because he had to be the rational one, he would still try his DMN strongest to stop that a whole. Not just for his duty, or for people to be Safino, it was also for the very selfish and hidden longing to make him pay. He may be selfish, but he didn't think that he could lessen his hatred for the villain, no matter how unheroic those feelings made him seem like, when he took a better grip on his emotions. He swore he had lost complete control, for the first time in years, though not for long. Stupid teenage body. He grimaced as he felt a sharp pain on his right knuckles. Punching the ground in such a violent way had dislocated his bones. DMN, at least, he was sure it wasn't broken. Thankfully, he had lost it for only a short time. He didn't have his bandages anymore and he couldn't have it back, or that would be suspicious. He seeked his tongue in annoyance. He stood up and took one of his wooden swords that he had gotten out of his closet, but hadn't used to place it inside his mouth. He gritted and snapped every dislocated bone of his knuckles back to their normal place. FCK, it was more painful than he was used to. Tathai's body really wasn't his future one. He had barely flinched when he did that during the war. Pouring out all his anger left him empty, the kind of empty that he didn't like. He sighed and decided for the better to just rest. He couldn't sleep for more than 4 hours, but that was still something. He didn't want to take those times for granted. He couldn't get out of bed the day after. He didn't have it in himself to find the will. He didn't even know why he felt so overwhelmed. It was unusual. The blur of his mind was still there, but the most noteworthy was the fact that he was physically tired. It wasn't just mental. He was falling sick. He knew it. It was weird, but it seemed like the change in his mind, and the feeling of acceptance of this new reality took its toll on his body. He was too weary and too out of it to notice that he skipped the day entirely. Maybe was it the fact that he had seen so many dead people that he had known well in his past, walking around. After all, he had never been close to Mount Lady, nor had he ever talked much with Kotsu in his past life. Seeing a younger Aizawa and a younger Class 1A and talking to his dear grandpa must have affected him more than he was willing to admit. He didn't know why, but he had been able to do well the past week or so. It seemed like his young body and a part of his young counterpart mind was still there, and since he had accepted that he really was here wherever here was, his body reacted accordingly. So here he was, laying in bed like a log, without the ability to fall asleep. He received a text from a worried Kaminari by the end of the day. He ignored all his calls but replied to his message, just to reassure him. The next day, he was still stuck in bed. He just couldn't move well, couldn't move too much. He hadn't realized just how much he had been pushing himself mentally and physically until now. He had always pushed himself, mentally, that was, in the future. He had just ignored all the red flags for his mental health. He had been strong, so pushing his body wasn't a problem. But he had forgotten that even if he knew his body well, no matter how young it was still young, and his mind had somehow oppressed his younger counterpart's own, which resulted in this temporary, he was sure and certain of that fog. He would be able to go back at full as this body could be in its way to get used to a 4 hours sleep daily force, as it stanch had to call you. He wouldn't be able to do much until next week mentally and physically. He had forgotten about that the day before, and Aizawa was going to have his butt. He grimaced at the thought. That was going to be a troublesome ordeal. He didn't have to call you. Because Aizawa called him first. He had groaned at his beeping phone and sighed when he saw a familiar number that he just knew was his former present homeroom teacher's one. Hello, he picked up tiredly. His exhausted voice must have reached Aizawa since he immediately asked about his health. Is there something wrong, Mineta? You skipped school without calling yesterday. Yeah, sorry about that. I was just too tired. I think I am sick. I didn't realize that I had skipped until now. I was just going to call you. He explained calmly but with a loud sigh. Aizawa was silent for a moment. He could easily picture him frowning. Have you seen a doctor? He asked with a firm tone. No, I can barely move out of bed, sensei. Yep, he could really picture his teacher's frown. How about calling a doctor home? A good idea. If I don't get better, then I'll do that. You can stay home today. Rest well. I'll call tomorrow, and if you are still unwell, then I'm going to visit with Recovery Girl. It was great that the school knew that he mostly lived alone since his guardian, his grandpa, had a lot of work and business trips. If that wasn't the case, then he would never have had this favor. A's files on its students were impressive like that. It wasn't the best hero school in the country for nothing. He was sure that they didn't know much about his past, though. He didn't think, at least. He hoped that he was going to get scolded by the nurse. It wasn't his fault that he fell sick, well, not entirely, at least. Okay, if you don't mind, I think I'm going to go back to sleep. He smiled tiredly. A white lie. He couldn't tell Aizawa that he could only sleep for 4 hours was going to make his teacher drink more coffee than he was already drinking. All right. Recover well. I'll call you tomorrow. Yeah, thanks. Have a good day, sensei. He replied politely before hanging up.